Chapter 33-24. Me, Demonist Ji, and Xiaoyao ascended together 20,000 years ago. Although the others entered the martial emperor realm, they chose not to ascend. Lin Xuanji continued, however, after ascending to the greater thousand worlds, the three of us split up. I descended in the southwest while the other two went missing. Su Zimo nodded to himself. Xiaoyao's bloodline had reverted, and there was a high chance that he was taken away by the Yin-Yang sacred ground. As for Demonist Ji, he did not know where she was. Lin Xuanji continued, most of the people here are humans, and they are rather friendly to me. Hence, I wandered around and told stories while asking about the greater thousand worlds. A few years ago, I even heard about your battle at the ancestral fire sacred ground. Later on, I heard that you became the master of chaos. I wanted to look for you in the southeast after my cultivation improved. At that point, Lin Xuanji sighed. My cultivation realm has been widened by you once more. At this moment, Lin Xuanji had yet to manifest his Tao and was only at the perfected martial emperor realm. To be fair, his cultivation speed was not slow. However, compared to Su Zimo, he was slightly inferior. All these years, Su Zimo stayed at the foot of Xian Pin Mountain every day with Daiyu and did not have the heart to cultivate. As such, he did not make any breakthroughs in his cultivation realm and was still at the perfected Tao comprehension realm. Of course, there was a huge gap between the Tao comprehension realm and the Tao manipulation realm. Without special opportunities, it was difficult to make breakthroughs. Lin Xuanji rubbed his chin. I've been telling stories near Xian Pin Mountain all these years. I heard that there is a mountain elder here who is proficient in all Das. If I can get some pointers from him, my cultivation realm might improve by leaps and bounds. Daiyu said, that's great. I'll bring you guys to meet the mountain elder. Although Su Zimo had stayed at Xian Pin Mountain for 30,000 years, he had never met the mountain elder. The three of them arrived at a straw hut at the foot of the mountain and saw a white-haired old man sitting on a rocking chair. He had a relaxed expression and was holding a tattered book in his hands. Sensing their arrival, the white-robed old man placed the tattered book in his hands aside and nodded at the three of them with a smile. However, the white-robed old man's eyes were drooping and he had a bitter expression. Even though he was smiling, he looked miserable. Mountain Elder. The three of them bowed at the same time. Su Zimo was curious about this mountain elder. For the evil lord to send Daiyu's reincarnation all the way here, he must have trusted the mountain elder enough. He wondered what was the relationship between the mountain elder and the evil lord. Senior, I've encountered a bottleneck in my great change Tao. Lin Xuanji chuckled. I've heard that you're a knowledgeable old man who knows a myriad of Das and even saints can't compare to you. I wonder if you could give me some pointers? No matter what, Lin Xuanji was the first to compliment him. Mountain Elder said, the number of Dian is 50, and 49 are used. If you want to condense the Tao of Dian, you have to find the elusive one. Where should I go to find the escaped one? Lin Xuanji replied, the great Tao is formless and ethereal. It's not like mystical skills that can be touched and seen everywhere. Otherwise, the Mountain Elder shook his head and said, although the great Tao is formless, it is everywhere. The great Tao is everywhere? Lin Xuanji was a little confused and asked, why do you say that? Why can't I see it? Don't make it sound so mysterious. You have to at least give me a specific location, right? Pausing for a moment, Lin Xuanji winked and asked, Senior, do you have some ruins of a secret realm here with traces of the great Tao? Can you let me study it? Hee. The Mountain Elder replied, the Tao is within the ants. Lin Xuanji froze for a moment. As long as one came into contact with the level of Tao, one's strength would be able to reach through the heavens and the earth, overturning rivers and seas. So, how could he be amongst ants? Looking outside, the Mountain Elder swept his gaze across the fields, forests, and streams. The Tao is within the fields, forests, and mountains. Lin Xuanji scratched his head, confused. Mountain Elder, why would the great Tao be within something as lowly as this? The Tao is within the bricks. The Mountain Elder did not reply and continued. Lin Xuanji could not help but roll his eyes and mutter, good lad, you're getting lowlier. The Mountain Elder burst into laughter. The Tao is drowning in sh*t. Lin Xuanji was speechless when he heard that. Turning around, he pulled Su Zimo and wanted to leave, muttering, "This old man is acting dumb and refuses to impart the real thing. Why did the 3,000 great Daos end up in sh*t? Lin Xuanji tugged at Su Zimo but did not manage to budge him. At that moment, Su Zimo frowned slightly and was deep in thought. "You!" Lin Xuanji was about to speak when Dai Yu pushed him away gently with her sleeves fluttering. She shook her head at him, indicating for him not to disturb Su Zimo. What was going on? Lin Xuanji was confused. This old man was just trying to fool people. Could it be that he could really comprehend something from it? For Su Zimo, the mountain elder's words had indeed allowed him to see a world that he had never seen before. The 3,000 great Daos were everywhere. Even the most humble and insignificant things contained the truths of the great Tao. The fields contained the great Tao of earth. Seeds were sown to nurture life and also contained the great Tao of life. The withering of vegetation also contained the great Tao of life and death. The 4 seasons changed, day and night alternated, wind, frost, rain and snow were all great Daos. It was only at that moment that Su Zimo finally understood. When he first saw fishermen, woodcutters, and ploughman fishing, chopping wood and farming, every single action they made was compatible with the great Tao. They had long since mastered the great Tao to the peak and brought it to the point of perfection. It was even more so for the great Tao of chaos. Chaos gave birth to all living beings, and all living beings returned to chaos. Traces of the great Tao of chaos could be found in all living beings. Su Zimo had once wanted to search for some items of chaos to comprehend the great Tao of chaos. However, that was rather far-fetched. Everything that he could see, sense, and hear actually contained the great Tao of chaos. At that moment, Su Zimo felt as though everything around him was vanishing. As time passed by, the village was no longer a village. The trees were no longer trees, and the river was no longer a river. Everything was fading away, and in the end, everything turned into chaos. And he was standing in the midst of that chaos. Boom! A loud bang sounded from within his body as though something had shattered. The next moment, the chaos world vanished. The world was the Tao, and the Tao was the world. The chaos world fused with the great Tao of chaos and turned into everything that he could control. The chaos world vanished, but it was everywhere. Su Zimo finally broke through. At lesser mastery of the Tao manipulation realm, he had become a Tao Lord. The power of his essence spirit increased exponentially as well and reached the level of a supreme. Right now, even without the power of Wu Dao's true body, he could suppress experts like Supreme Lin Ming. Su Zimo opened his eyes and was enveloped by night. The rocking chair in front of him was empty, and the mountain elder was nowhere to be seen. Lin Xuanji was gone as well. Only Dai Yu stood not far away, guarding him. Initially, Su Zimo wanted to thank the mountain elder. However, he soon realized something and asked, "How long has it been?" Dai Yu smiled. "About a month." Su Zimo was stunned for a moment before shaking his head with a bitter smile. In his senses, everything earlier seemed to have happened in the span of a few breaths. However, he did not expect that the entire breakthrough process would last for a month as time passed. During this period of time, Dai Yu had been guarding by his side. Chapter 33-25. Another 20,000 years passed. All these years, because Lin Xuanji had been traveling and telling stories in the southwest, he attracted 3 old friends from the middle realm Ifeng Cantillon, Old Man Taiguan, and Chess Immortal Junyu. Old friends reunited and shared interesting stories with one another. It was a joyous occasion. Lin Xuanji, Feng Cantillon, Old Man Taiguan, and Junyu had all sought guidance from the Mountain Elder. All of them benefited and had already entered the Tao comprehending realm. In the blink of an eye, Su Zimo and Dai Yu had stayed in Xinmi Mountain for more than 50,000 years. During this period of time, he seemed to have truly distanced himself from all the chaos and strife, enjoying a rare period of peace ever since he started cultivating. Occasionally, news would spread from the southeast. The chaos sacred ground was growing stronger day by day under the leadership of Supreme being Evergreen and the others. Under the protection of the chaos sacred ground, the plant-wood race gradually rose as well, occupying various territories, and the factions of the 10,000 races withdrew one after another. For the past few days, many cultivators had arrived near Shinmi Mountain, breaking the long-awaited peace. These cultivators came from all over the world. Experts of the human race from the 36 grotto heavens and 72 blessed lands gathered here one after another in a bustling crowd. Even Suzimo and Daiyu, who stayed in their rooms every day, sensed it. What happened? Why are there so many people outside? Suzimo and Daiyu arrived outside and saw Lin Xuanji, Junyu, and the others walking over. They could not help but ask curiously. Lin Xuanji chuckled and teased. The two of you are really something, sticking to each other all day and never leaving each other's side. You guys don't even care about the flood outside. Feng Cantillon roared in laughter as well. When are the two of you going to get married? We're still waiting for your wedding banquet. Although Suzimo and Daiyu had long become Dao companions, there was no ceremony for them to get married. Daiyu was not interested in that. Suzimo did not care about such formalities either. In their hearts, it was enough as long as they could be together forever. As for the ceremony, it was dispensable. When he heard Feng Santian's words, Suzimo shook his head and chuckled. Forget about the ceremony. We can find a time to gather these old friends of ours and drink to our heart's content. Suzimo looked at Daiyu with a questioning gaze. Up to you. Daiyu smiled. Then, she seemed to have thought of something and said faintly, however, you have to prepare a thoughtful gift for me this time. Suzimo blushed when he heard that. He couldn't help but recall the gift he gave Daiyu when he found her in the Grand Desolation Domain. Isn't the gift good? Suzimo felt a little guilty and coughed lightly. What do you think? Daiyu rolled her eyes. What did he give you? Lin Xuanji's eyes burned with the flames of gossip as he approached and asked with a wretched expression. Move aside. Suzimo pushed Lin Xuanji's head away and changed the topic. What's going on outside? I heard that the space-time sacred land opened up a forbidden area, allowing the paragons of all races to go there and attempt to break through to the Saint Realm and prove their Tao. It was the old man with the iron crown who spoke up to help Suzimo out of this predicament. The old man with the iron crown said, after hearing this news, many human experts from the 36 paradise and 72 blessed lands have gathered here, preparing to head to this place. A forbidden area of space-time? Suzimo raised his brows. Junyu said, it's said that only the experts of the 5 sacred lands can enter this forbidden area of space-time to prove their Tao. Now that it's open to the experts of all races, it can be considered a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Suzimo frowned and asked, if it's a forbidden area of the space-time sacred land, why would they be so kind as to open it to the experts of all races? Lin Xuanji said, I estimate that the 5 sacred lands have suffered many casualties in the Treastrimsa heavens, leaving some great Dao saint seats vacant. They want to gather more saints as soon as possible and urge the races to conquer the 4 Daos once more. That's why they're giving the races such a chance. As far as I know, after this news was released, the races were shaken. Paragons who have cultivated to the peak of the Dao control realm will probably go to the forbidden area of space-time to try their luck. Suzimo asked, what's so special about this forbidden area of space-time that the paragons of all races are tempted? Lin Xuanji said, I heard that in this forbidden area of space-time, even if one fails to break through to the Saint Realm for the first time, they can guarantee that they won't die. Of course, if they continue to break through and still fail, they will still die. Suzimo's expression changed. Dao integration to become a saint was extremely dangerous. Since ancient times, there had been countless supremes who had failed in the process of Dao unification and died. There was no turning back after becoming a saint. The moment they failed, they would die. However, according to Lin Xuanji, they would not die even if they failed their first attempt at breaking through to the Saint Realm in this forbidden area of space-time. This meant that there were 2 chances to break through to the Saint Realm in the forbidden area of space-time. This temptation was too great for every supreme being expert. It was no wonder that this news would cause the races to be shaken. Unfortunately, he had just cultivated to lesser mastery of the Dao control realm and did not have the chance to break through to the Saint Realm. Otherwise, He would want to enter this forbidden area of space-time to give it a try. Su Zimo was puzzled and asked, how can this forbidden area of space-time have such a heaven-defying effect that it can protect the lives of paragons who have failed their Tao integration? I don't know either. Lin Xuanji shook his head. Su Zimo looked towards Daiyu instinctively. Daiyu did not speak during the conversation earlier on. At this moment, her expression was indifferent, and there was even a hint of coldness in the depths of her eyes. This forbidden area of space-time is related to the human race? Su Zimo vaguely realized something and asked. Daiyu nodded. That forbidden area of space-time was actually the life-sacred land of the past, and also the sacred land of the human race. However, more than 6 billion years ago, the space-time sacred land sealed it and took it for themselves. Everyone was shocked when they heard this. Lin Xuanji came to a realization. No wonder I couldn't find the life-sacred land after so many years of traveling. It was already taken away by the space-time sacred land. Daiyu said, there is a life stone in the life-sacred land. If one fails to break through to the saint realm for the first time in the sacred land, this life stone will release a large amount of vitality to resist the backlash of the great Tao and protect the cultivator's life. Originally, the life-sacred land was prepared for the human race. Unfortunately, it has been taken over by the space-time sacred land for the people of the 5 sacred lands to cultivate. Su Zimo was silent. Under the suppression of the heavenly punishment sacred land, the human race had no saints. In the face of such humiliation, they naturally could not resist. Junyu said, since the space-time sacred land has released the news that this place is open to all races, this naturally includes the human race. Fellow Taoist has already cultivated to the peak of the Tao manipulation realm, so you might as well go to the life-sacred land and give it a try. Forget it. Daiyu shook her head. The great Tao that I cultivate has already had someone become a saint. Even if I go to the life-sacred land, I won't have a chance to break through to the saint realm. To me, becoming a saint or not is no longer important. After saying this, Daiyu and Su Zimo looked at each other and smiled. The two of them understood each other's intentions. In her last life, Daiyu pursued eternal life and an even vaster world. However, she had died once and been reborn, so her mentality had changed greatly. Only when she awakened her memories and saw Su Zimo did she understand what was most important. End of this chapter. Chapter 33-26. The moment the forbidden land of space-time opened, a spatial node appeared in every major territory, allowing Tao manipulation realm experts to enter. The spatial node in the southwestern territory was located near Profound Valley Mountain. In the past few days, many human Tao sovereigns, great sovereigns, and even sovereigns of the 36 paradise and 72 blessed lands had gathered here. Just the number of supreme being experts of the human clan added up to several hundred. Through this spatial node, one could see what was happening in the forbidden land of space-time. Thus, many Tao sovereigns and great sovereigns had come to witness the moment when the human Tao integration saints became saints. After all, to them, this was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, a most precious experience. However, because the mountain elder had come forward to stop them, the human sovereigns had not entered the forbidden land of space-time after it opened. The space-time sacred land has released the news that the forbidden land is open to all races, including the human race. Why does the mountain elder want us to give up? That's right. The forbidden land of space-time is the life-sacred land of our human race. Why can't we humans go there? Is the mountain elder worried about something? The mountain elder spent most of his time in Profound Valley Mountain, living a carefree life and secluded from worldly affairs. However, the human experts of the 36 paradise and 72 blessed lands had mostly received the mountain elder's teachings and were extremely respectful to him. However, with the chance to become a saint right in front of them, the human experts were unwilling to give up, nor could they understand the mountain elder's intentions. The mountain elder softly sighed. The space-time sacred land has opened the forbidden land, drawing in the sovereigns of all races. When the time comes, the life-sacred land might have hundreds of thousands of sovereigns. After reaching the Tao manipulation realm, one had a lifespan of 10 billion years. In this long period of time, Even the weakest race would give birth to a few geniuses who would eventually become sovereigns. For example, some powerful clans might have dozens or even hundreds of supreme beings. When the sovereigns of all races gathered, the Mountain Elder's words of hundreds of thousands were no exaggeration. The Mountain Elder said, "Hundreds of thousands of sovereigns are all hegemons of their own regions. With them gathered together, there are too many variables. It's very likely that things will go out of control. All of you must be aware that the number of vacant Great Tao Saint positions is limited. Among the hundreds of thousands of sovereigns, many of them will cultivate the same Great Tao. It's very likely that conflicts will break out. Once someone became a sage, other cultivators who cultivated this Great Tao would no longer have a chance. Therefore, supremes who cultivated the same type of Great Tao would have a trace of enmity between each other. If they were all in the Great Thousand Realms and each occupied an area, there would be many restrictions. Perhaps they would not fight. However, with so many supreme beings gathered in the forbidden land of life, the possibility of such a conflict greatly increased. One of the human race sovereigns said, "Apart from the various sacred grounds, the number of human race sovereigns among the myriad of races is definitely at the forefront. Even if a war breaks out, we humans will not lose to them." That's right. All these years, the status of the human race had not been high only because they had no saints. However, under the saint realm, the human race is not weaker than any other race. If we compete fairly for the position of Great Tao Saint, I believe that in the life-sacred land, our human race will have a better chance. After all, the life-sacred land was once the sacred land of the human race. In this holy land, the human clan must have been blessed with all kinds of luck, which made it easier for them to break through to the saint realm. The Mountain Elder bitterly smiled. It is precisely because of this that the life-sacred land is more likely to become the target of public criticism. The various human race sovereigns were all shaken as they understood the reason. In the life-sacred land, it was easier for the human race to become a saint, which meant that the other races had a lower chance of becoming a saint. In this way, it was very easy to arouse the hostility of the other races. The chatter in the crowd gradually died down. Gu Liang and the other human race experts present had lived for more than 1 billion years, perhaps even several billion years. They naturally understood the dangers involved. After a long period of silence, the atmosphere was somewhat oppressive. Finally, someone spoke. "Are we just going to give up like this? The path of cultivation is long and arduous. I've endured for so many years just for this opportunity. Not only is there a vacancy for a Great Tao Saint, but we can also go to the human race's sacred land. I don't want to give up. That's the human race's sacred land, but we've never set foot there. Why should we retreat from the human race's sacred land? They should be the ones to retreat. Even if it's extremely dangerous, I still want to try. If a human can become a saint, even if they die, they can rest in peace. As long as a saint is born in the human race, we will have hope and a future." The various human race sovereigns spoke with impassioned voices, their eyes flashing with determination. The Mountain Elder shook his head and sighed deeply. 36 grotto heavens and 72 blessed lands. To be precise, almost none of the humans in the Southwest had experienced the turmoil back then, nor had they seen the tragic scene of a saint's life being sacrificed like grass. More than 6 billion years ago, there were 3,000 saints of the human race, the leader of all races. But so what? However, when the Mountain Elder saw the gazes of the human race sovereigns, he knew that no matter how he persuaded them, it would be useless. The spirit and fighting spirit that these humans exuded moved him and made him sigh with emotion. Compared to these humans, he was like a lethargic old man with one foot in the grave. Farewell, everyone. Hundreds of human race sovereigns looked at the large group of humans near Xianku Mountain and waved gently. Then, they bowed deeply to the Mountain Elder and rushed toward the spatial node without looking back. Looking at the departing figures of the human race sovereigns, the Mountain Elder sighed again. This time was supposed to be his lunch break. But now, the Mountain Elder had no intention of leaving. Instead, he stood there with the other human race experts, looking at the images of the forbidden land of space-time reflected in the void. The fisherman, the woodcutter, the farmer, and the cook who had been fishing by the stream all came to the mountain elder's side. They had followed the mountain elder more than 6 billion years ago. In the past few years, they had long since put down their weapons and simply enjoyed the pleasures of nature. Now that the forbidden land of space-time was open, the four of them had no intention of entering. Seeing the mountain elder's worried expression, the fisherman said, "Mountain elder, there is no need to worry. If several hundred human race sovereigns gather together, there are few races that can oppose them. The 10,000 races are a sheet of loose sand. It won't be easy to unite them, unless—" The woodcutter was halfway through his sentence when he suddenly stopped. The cook guessed at the woodcutter's worries and said, "Even if there are people from the sacred land interfering, the four paths won't just sit by and watch." The mountain elder shook his head. "Once the four paths sovereigns leave the Treastrimsa heaven and enter the life-sacred land, the sacred race sovereigns of the 5 sacred lands will definitely appear and lead the 10,000 races in encirclement. The demon lord and evil lord can naturally see this and will not allow the four paths sovereigns to participate." The fisherman said thoughtfully, "If the four paths sovereigns don't interfere, they can only watch as more and more saints are born among the 10,000 races and join the 5 sacred lands, then turn around and deal with them. This is the 5 sacred lands overt scheme." The farmer looked at the many figures in the forbidden land of space-time and muttered, "I hope they can return safely." Chapter 33:27. The moment the human supremes stepped into the forbidden land of space-time, their expressions were somewhat dazed and filled with emotion. This was once the holy land of the human race, but for more than 6 billion years, they had never set foot in it. Some of the human supremes bent down and picked up a handful of yellow soil with tears in their eyes. For some reason, an inexplicable sadness welled up in their hearts. "Everyone, the future of the human race depends on us." Supreme Jiangxiao took a deep breath and said in a deep voice, "That's right." Supreme Hui Ming put his palms together and softly chanted a Buddhist mantra. Everyone moved and headed toward the center of the Holy Land. Along the way, they saw many Supremes speeding through the air. Tens of thousands of Supremes had gathered here. Supremes of various races could be seen almost everywhere. Not long after, the human Supremes saw an ancient and dilapidated city appear at the end of the horizon. That was once the holy land of the human race, the City of Life. However, now only some dilapidated walls remained. The dilapidated city walls stood there, and one could vaguely see the prosperity of this ancient city. In the middle of the ancient city sat an ancient palace. Its 4 sides had long been destroyed, and only a few thick stone pillars remained to support the palace. It looked like it was on the verge of collapse. In the middle of the palace, there stood a white jade stone taller than a person. This white jade stone was the stone of life of the human race. The closer they got to the City of Life, the more Supremes they encountered. Although in the Life Holy Land, no matter where they were, they could try to break through to the Saint Realm, however, the majority of Supreme Being experts still wished to be closer to the Stone of Life. In order to avoid unnecessary conflict, the human Supremes did not rashly step forward. Instead, they settled down near the City of Life and spread out. In fact, hundreds of human Supremes, only 100 or so had the chance to break through to the Saint Realm. The other human Supremes all had saints occupying the Great Path saint positions that they cultivated. Although these human Supremes had no hope of reaching the Tao integration stage, they guarded these 100 or so Supremes. They were on guard to prevent accidents. Among the tens of thousands of races, there were almost no races. Hundreds of Supremes could be born. Seeing the formation of the human race, most of them avoided and took a detour. Time passed. More and more humans gathered near Xinku Mountain. It wasn't just Tao masters. Many cultivators of low realms also came here when they heard that the human race might produce a saint. In the blink of an eye, a year passed. The first saint was finally born in the forbidden land of time. It came from the Heavenly Eye clan and was compatible with the great Tao of petrification, becoming a saint. This scene caused many Heavenly Eye tribe members to cheer. The space-time sacred land has issued an order. After becoming a saint, he had to leave the forbidden space-time zone as soon as possible. The saint of the Heavenly Eye clan did not dare to disobey. He left immediately. Over the past year, other supreme beings had also attempted to break through to the saint realm, but they all ended in failure. With the protection of the Stone of Life, although they did not die from Tao disintegration, these supreme being experts did not dare to recklessly attempt Tao integration again. If he failed again, not even the Stone of Life could save him. Most of the supreme being experts were secretly preparing, adjusting their states, and looking for the most perfect and suitable opportunity. Over the past year, more than 100 human supremes who had the chance to break through to the saint realm had yet to try. On this day, in the crowd, Supreme Being Jiang Chao suddenly opened his eyes. Divine light blossomed from them as he attempted the Tao integration stage to break through into the sage stage. To become a saint was to fuse the great Tao that one cultivated with one's flesh, blood, and primordial spirit. This had extremely high requirements for one's physical body, bloodline, and primordial spirit. Furthermore, it required an understanding of the great Tao that surpassed others. Supreme Being Jiang Chao had a pained expression as his body trembled continuously. Dense traces of the great Tao appeared on the surface of his body. Poof! All of a sudden, Supreme Being Jiang Chao's expression changed drastically. He spat out a large mouthful of blood, and his entire body was about to collapse. Right then, a majestic vitality burst forth from the direction of the Stone of Life and entered Supreme Being Jiang Chao's body. It resisted the backlash of the great Tao and helped him recover from his injuries. A moment later, Supreme Being Jiang Chao had recovered. However, he had already failed his first Tao integration. When the humans on Xianmi Mountain saw this scene, they all revealed a trace of pity. In the forbidden land of time, Supreme Being Jiang Chao's expression was grim as he carefully recalled the process of the Tao integration just now. He deduced every detail and experienced every bit of enlightenment. Brother Jiang, don't be discouraged. You'll still have a chance after recuperating for a period of time. That's right. That Heavenly Eye tribe member also succeeded in his second Tao integration after half a year. Everyone thought that Supreme Being Jiang Chao had suffered a blow and consoled him. A moment later, Supreme Being Jiang Chao clenched his fists slightly and said in a deep voice, "I'm going to attempt Tao integration again. Fellow Taoists, success or failure depends on this." Brother Jiang, don't be rash. Although there are many Supremes in the forbidden land of time who also cultivate the title Tao, they might not be able to succeed in Tao integration. Tao integration is no small matter. We can't rush it. The Supremes of the human race hurriedly persuaded. Supreme Being Jiang Chao smiled casually. If I succeed, there's naturally nothing more to say. If I fail, this will be the last time we meet. The moment he said that, Supreme Being Jiang Chao attempted Tao integration again. If he failed this Tao integration, there would only be one outcome: death by Tao integration. Be it in the forbidden land of time or Xinmi Mountain, many humans watched this scene nervously. Traces of the great Tao appeared around Supreme Being Jiang Chao's body once more. They were densely packed and supported his body into the air. His expression was also changing rapidly. One moment, it was flushed red, and the next moment, it was purplish green. His condition was extremely unstable. Although his body did not collapse, the surface of his body was cracking continuously. Blood seeped out and dyed his clothes red. His life was hanging by a thread. Everyone held their breaths and stared at this scene without blinking. They were extremely nervous. An unknown period of time passed. A loud bang sounded from Supreme Being Jiang Chao's body, and his aura skyrocketed. The next moment, the world trembled and the great Tao resonated. The sound of tides could be heard and attracted countless gazes. The many Supremes in the forbidden land of time and space realized that another saint was born. The faces of some of the 9 Heavens Supremes who practiced the Tide Tao darkened when they saw this. Their faces turned extremely ugly. The ascension of Supreme Being Jiang Chao to a saint meant that their path to becoming a saint was completely severed. In the vicinity of Xianku Mountain, after a short period of silence, there was a burst of cheers and a hubbub of voices. A saint of the human race. When the fisherman, woodcutter, farmer, and chef saw that, they heaved a sigh of relief and smiled. Right then, Dharma Master Hui Ming stood up and attempted Tao integration to break through to the saint realm. Dharma Master Hui Ming's body shone with a Buddhist light that intensified. Before long, Sanskrit sounds suddenly sounded from the world. Dharma Master Hui Ming's aura skyrocketed, and he fused with the great Tao of transcendence, attaining eternal life and becoming a saint. Dharma Master Hui Ming succeeded in his first Tao integration. The humans of Xianmi Mountain were invigorated when they saw two supremes of the human race becoming saints one after another. They were extremely excited and beamed. Amidst the clamor and joy, the mountain elder was the only one who still had a bitter expression. He frowned, and there was no joy on his face. Instead, the worry in his eyes intensified. End of chapter. Chapter 33-28. At the foot of Xian Pin Mountain, Su Zimo and Dai Yu lived here in seclusion and did not participate in this extremely important event for the human race. Living a leisurely and peaceful life far away from the fighting was what the two of them yearned for. Of course, when they heard the cheers in the distance and realized that the human race had produced a saint, Su Zimo and Dai Yu were overjoyed and celebrated. As they chatted, Su Zimo suddenly thought of something and asked, "I've seen the sacred clans of the 5 sacred lands, but I've never seen the sacred clans of the life sacred land in all these years. Could it be that none of their bloodlines have survived? There are no sacred race in the life sacred land?" Dai Yu shook her head. According to the mountain elder, there were no sacred race in the life sacred land even 6 billion years ago. That's strange. Su Zimo frowned slightly. The sign of becoming a sacred race was bloodline ancestral awakening. Did the beings of the life sacred land not show signs of ancestral awakening? Bloodline ancestral awakening, Su Zimo murmured thoughtfully. 3 days later. As usual, the two of them worked at sunrise and rested at sunset. It was no different from their usual routine, but on this morning, the two of them felt something strange at the same time. Every day at this time, in the nearby villages, many people got up one after another to work, smoke rising from the chimneys of the houses. The children's running and the adults scolding intertwined, awakening the vitality of this paradise. But at this moment, the surroundings were quiet and lifeless. It was eerily quiet, a stifling silence. Su Zimo frowned and exchanged a glance with Dai Yu. They both saw the strange look in each other's eyes. There was definitely no fighting near Xian Pin Mountain, and there was no smell of blood. Otherwise, the two of them would have noticed it long ago. At this moment, a girl ran over from afar, her face full of tears. It was she who told Su Zimo about Dai Yu in the ancestral fire sacred land. Over the years, Su Zimo had heard Dai Yu mention it. This girl was called Haiteng. She was the woodcutter's daughter. 10,000 years ago, she had stepped into the Tao manipulation realm. She became a Tao sovereign. When she got close, Haiteng threw herself into Dai Yu's arms and cried loudly. What happened? Dai Yu gently stroked Haiteng's back. She asked softly, "Father and the others are trapped inside. There's no way out." Haiteng's eyes were already red from crying. Dai Yu frowned slightly and asked, "Didn't your father not intend to enter the forbidden area of time and space? What happened? Tell me slowly." Haiteng pursed her lips. She sobbed again and again. He tried his best to calm his breathing. He said, "After Jiang Chao and Hui Ming became martial saints, the two martial saints became martial saints, the supreme beings of the human race inside. This will cause the other experts to be extremely hostile. Under the instigation of the people from the Holy Lands, the supremes of the various clans joined hands. I want to drive the hundreds of human autarchs out of the forbidden area of space-time." Su Zimo and Dai Yu heard this. They all frowned. Haiteng continued, "That place is the life-sacred land of our human race, so the human race's supremes are naturally unwilling to leave." As the two sides faced each other, a conflict broke out. Su Zimo asked, "Where are Saints Jiang Chao and Hui Ming?" "They have already returned to Xianmi Mountain," Haiteng said, "after becoming a saint. They can't stay in the life-sacred land." After a pause, Haiteng continued, "What's more, this is a conflict between supremes. They are saints. There's no way to interfere." "And then?" Dai Yu asked. Haiteng continued, "Father and the fisherman's 3 uncles saw that the situation was not good. They set off to enter the life-sacred land. They prepared to persuade the human supremes to return. At least when they return to the Great Thousand World, they will have a chance to become a saint in the future. If they are buried inside, they will have no chance at all. But the situation is changing rapidly. By the time Father and the other three arrived, the situation was already out of control, and both sides were dying. Father and the other three were also trapped. There was no way out, so they could only lead the human supremes to fight their way out. They retreated to the nearest life city. At this point, Haitang started crying again. Father and the others can't hold on much longer. What should we do? In a short while, Suzimo, Daiyu, and Daiyu had already arrived near the spatial node and saw a large crowd. An endless crowd. The atmosphere was extremely stifling, with only the occasional sobbing. Everyone had sorrowful expressions as they looked at the scene reflected by the spatial node. Suzimo and Daiyu also looked up. They saw that various places in the forbidden land of space-time were fighting and killing. It was chaos. The flames of war were everywhere. In the largest battlefield in the City of Life. In the air above this dilapidated ancient city, many supremes stood in the air, exuding powerful auras as they surrounded the City of Life so tightly that not even a drop of water could pass through. There were not many empty Great Tao Saint positions. Many supremes who cultivated the same Great Tao were already hostile to each other. But the supremes were still able to restrain themselves, abiding by some tacit understanding and doing their best to maintain a balance. Before this, all the supremes had tacitly agreed to a certain rule. Even if they cultivated the same Great Tao, it would depend on their own ability to see who could succeed in Tao integration, and the appearance of the human supremes to seize karmic luck. This balance was broken. The birth of two saints in the human race caused a huge commotion among the myriad races. Even the supremes of the 5 great sacred lands were not confident. They stood out to incite the supremes of the myriad races to expel the human supremes from the forbidden land of space-time. This action was equivalent to breaking the tacit rule in the hearts of the supremes. If they could use force to clear the obstacles ahead and seize the Great Tao Saint position, then others could do the same. At this point, the supremes of the various races fell into a chaotic battle for the Great Tao Saint position. Although the supremes of the 5 great sacred lands were not of the sacred race, they were still above the myriad races and had unshakable status and prestige. Under their orders, more and more supreme being experts gathered under their command, and they quickly formed the 5 largest forces. The current situation was becoming clearer and clearer. Only by joining one of the 5 great sacred lands would one not be targeted. Even if some supremes did not have any hostility towards the human race, they would still choose to join the 5 great sacred lands in order to protect themselves. At this moment, the number of supremes around the City of Life had already reached 300,000, and this number was still rapidly increasing. Even though they were looking at this scene through the spatial node, they could still feel the pressure brought about by the dozens of supreme being experts. It was suffocating. At this moment, the supremes of the myriad races gathered here with only one goal: the hundreds of supremes of the human race in the City of Life. Under the repeated attacks of the supremes of the myriad races, the City of Life had long been destroyed and reduced to ruins. Even the originally crumbling palace had collapsed. There was only a stone of life left in the ruins. There was also a group of human supremes surrounding the stone of life. The city was broken and the palace collapsed, but the people were still there. Saint Jiangxiao, Saint Huiming, please step forward and bring them back. That's right. Only you can resolve this situation. The human cultivators could not stand it anymore and turned to look at the 2 saints Jiangxiao and Huiming who had just stepped into the sage stage. Saint Jiangxiao had a troubled expression. The other races have saints, and so do the 5 great sacred lands. Once we step forward and break the balance, the saints of the various races and even the saints of the 5 great sacred lands might appear. When that time comes, at this point, Saint Jiangxiao lowered his head slightly and sighed. Saint Huiming did not dare to meet the gazes of the many humans. He lowered his head with a guilty expression. The main reason why they did not dare to step forward was because they were worried that if they interfered, they would offend the sacred lands and attract heavenly punishment. Are we just going to watch our supremes of the human race die in there? Is there anyone who can come and save them? More and more cries came from the crowd. Mountain Elder frowned with a bitter expression. He did not say anything, and the sorrow in his eyes intensified. Within the forbidden grounds of time and space, the supremes of the human race were already covered in injuries. However, every single one of them had fearless expressions as they stood with their heads held high without any intention of retreating in their eyes. Even against enemies 10 or 100 times stronger than them, the supremes of the human race did not yield. The difference between the two sides was too great. They were already prepared to die. Even though they knew that there was no hope, they did not give up on resisting. It was as though there was an invisible force supporting them. He's so silly. Why isn't he willing to back down? A woman with a big belly could not help but cry out when she saw her Tao partner fall into the trap. The people of the sacred lands said that as long as he's willing to cripple his own Tao, he can save his life. What are they holding on for? Is it worth it? Someone asked in a daze amidst their heartache. Dignity and glory. A woman's voice was heard. It was calm but powerful. Everyone turned towards the source of the voice and saw Suzimo and Dayu walking through the crowd. Everyone was deep in thought and vaguely understood something. When they turned back to look at the supremes of the human race in the forbidden zone of time and space, they felt an impact that struck their hearts, and tears filled their eyes instantly. Those people stepped on the ruins of the ancient city and protected the dignity of the human race with their lives. With the life stone behind them, they protected the glory of the human race with their blood. Suzimo and Dayu exchanged glances and understood each other's thoughts at the same time. Dayu had died once and was reborn. She was already tired of fighting and killing. In fact, she did not care much about the sage realm or eternal life and was indifferent to them. Suzimo had been cultivating and finally found Dayu. After living a peaceful and leisurely life, he was already tired of fighting and killing. However, when they saw that the human race was in trouble and was being bullied, they did not hesitate at all and decided to join forces once more to head to the forbidden zone of time and space. Dayu brought Haitang to the Mountain Elder and bowed slightly. Sister Dai, where are you guys going? As though she realized something, Haitang asked with a trembling voice. We're going to bring your father back. Dayu smiled gently. Don't. It's too dangerous inside. Although Haitang was worried about her father, she did not want Dayu to be in danger. You're only at lesser mastery of the Tao manipulation realm. Are you confident? Lin Xuanji came over as well and looked at Suzimo, asking softly, how about you stay outside and not be a burden to them? Suzimo smiled and did not explain. Walking together with Dayu, he headed towards the dimensional node of the forbidden zone of time and space right in front of everyone's shocked gazes. Even the two saints, Jiang Chao and Hui Ming, raised their heads and looked at them in disbelief. Against dozens of supreme experts, entering at this moment was equivalent to courting death. The human supremes inside had no way out and were willing to die for their dignity and glory. That was understandable. But why were those two doing it? Mountain Elder, please persuade them. Haitang could not help but ask with a worried expression. Mountain Elder looked at the backs of the two and remained silent. However, the worry in his eyes seemed to have faded a little. End of Chapter 1. Chapter 33-29. The Forbidden Land of Spacetime. Although there were many autarchs gathered around the City of Life, more than 300,000 of them, there were not many who attacked the human autarchs. Most of them had the mentality of watching a good show from the sidelines. Those who truly wanted to kill these human race supremes were either enemies of the human race in the past, or they cultivated the same great Tao and competed with each other. Even so, there were still more than 10,000 autarchs. To the hundreds of human autarchs, more than 10,000 autarchs was a force that they would find difficult to resist. If not for the fisherman, woodcutter, farmer, and chefs of Xianmi Mountain, all the autarchs of the 36 grotto heavens and 72 blessed lands standing at the very front would have perished. The great Taos cultivated by the 4 autarchs of Xianmi Mountain were extremely unique. Some were extremely ordinary, but when used by the 4 of them, they possessed boundless power. The fisherman wielded a fishing rod, using the great Tao as a line to fish out all living beings. Every time he flung out his fishing rod, He would fish out a autark and toss them out. Meanwhile, the woodcutter cultivated the Tao of felling. However, this was different from how he usually cut down trees. At this moment, the hatchet in his hand was no longer felling trees, but autarks. The chefs cultivated the great Tao of cooking. Wielding two ox-dismembering knives, they flew up and down with ease. In the blink of an eye, they could turn a living being into a skeleton, without a speck of flesh or blood on them. Meanwhile, the farmer cultivated the great Tao of life. In his hands, the power of the great Tao flowed endlessly, filling the sky with willow catkins that healed the injuries of the fishermen, the woodcutter, the chefs, and the other human autarks. Of course, in the eyes of the autarks of the various sacred lands, the humans below were already birds in a cage, fish on the chopping block. With a single order, hundreds of thousands of autarks could charge forward and crush these humans to death at any time. Are you still going to put up a desperate struggle? Autark Gu Sha of the space-time sacred land stood in the air, looking down at the fishermen and the others. He smiled faintly and said, I'm only giving these human autarks a chance to live because of the four of you, but you'd better know what's good for you. The fisherman said in a low voice, Gu Sha, we will take the remaining human autarks and leave this place. We will not fight with you for the great Tao Saint position. No. Supreme Gu Sha's expression was cold as he shook his head and said, if you leave this place, you will still have a chance to become a saint. Because of our old friendship, I don't want to kill all of you. As long as you are willing to destroy your great Tao, I can spare your lives. Destroying one's own great Tao meant that one's cultivation level would drop, and one would have to cultivate from the beginning. Don't waste your breath on him. One of the human race supremes laughed and said, the human race has given birth to two saints. Today, even if we die here, we can rest in peace. Exactly. Another human race supreme martial artist said, if you don't become a saint, death is inevitable. If I can die in the human race's sacred land, under the stone of life, that would be the best ending I can think of. The supremes of the human race were united against a common enemy. They were already prepared to die. They stood on the land that had given birth to the human race, unwilling to throw away the dignity of the human race, and even more unwilling to abandon the glory of the human race. They knew that at this moment, there were countless members of their race, creatures of all races, watching them from the outside. If they were to submit in front of the myriad races, it would be difficult for the human race to straighten their backs in the future. Since you all want to die, I'll fulfill your wish. Supreme Gu Sha waved his hand, pointed forward, and ordered, kill them all. Many of the supremes in the crowd hesitated. In fact, many supremes had gathered under the 5 sacred lands only to protect themselves. They had no choice but to do so. They had no grudges with the human race, and they did not want to be enemies with the human race. However, at this moment, the supremes of the various races were no longer in control. Moreover, killing these human supremes was equivalent to clearing away the obstacles. It could indeed increase their chances of becoming a saint by a little. Ha 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 ha. Chef suddenly laughed loudly and said, how sad, how sad. You obey the 5 sacred lands and help them do evil. Do you really think you can be spared? Today, we will be buried here, and the next one will be you. The supremes of the myriad races were silent. Even if Gu Ho realized this, what could he do? Could they join forces to deal with the 5 sacred lands? In the upper-class world, the 5 sacred lands were high and mighty, controlling everything. Who dared to go against them? More and more supremes stepped forward and joined the battle. Between heaven and earth, the great Tao crisscrossed, intertwining and spreading. The pressure on the fishermen and the other humans increased. They were already at the end of their rope to be able to hold on until now. After all, the difference in numbers between the two sides was too great. Even if Supreme Gu Sha did not give the order, they would not be able to hold on for long. The fisherman said coldly, your sacred lands broke the rules, causing everyone here to be in danger and fall into war. You deserve to be killed. Supreme Gu Sha chuckled and said, what is a sacred land? The existence of a sacred land is to ignore the rules and laws. All the rules and laws in this world are to restrict you ants. The people of our sacred lands can surpass the rules at any time. The sacred lands are nothing special. At this moment, a voice came from afar. Before anyone could react, this voice had already arrived in front of them at an extremely fast speed. The person spoke again. Not to mention the people of the sacred lands, I have also killed the sacred race. As soon as he finished speaking, it was earth-shattering. The person who spoke had even killed the sacred race. This sentence caused an uproar among the supremes of the myriad races. Even the attacks on the fishermen and the other supremes of the human race paused. The supremes of the myriad races turned their heads and looked towards the voice. They saw two figures flying in the air. It was a man and a woman. The man had black hair and a green robe, while the woman wore a blood-red robe. The two of them stood side by side, their clothes fluttering in the wind, like an immortal couple made in heaven. Who are these two people? I seem to have seen that green-robed man somewhere before. Whether it was Su Zimo or Dayu, it had not been long since they rose to power. Su Zimo had truly become famous in the vast thousand world in the four great mountain ranges of the ancestral fire sacred land. However, that was a battle between heavenly venerables, and not many Tao manipulation realm experts paid attention to it. Almost all the supremes present had never seen him before. After Dayu stepped into cultivation, she lived in seclusion in Xianmi Mountain all year round and rarely showed herself. In the vast thousand world, she was also unknown. Therefore, after the two of them appeared, not many of the supremes present recognized them. Ha! A Tao venerate at the initial stage of the Tao manipulation realm actually dares to come here. A Protoss supreme sneered slightly. Almost all those who entered the forbidden land of time and space were perfected Tao manipulation realm experts who could break through to the Saint realm at any time. Su Zimo was only at the initial stage of the Tao manipulation realm, so he was naturally not taken seriously by the supremes. A Tao venerate dares to say that he has killed people from the sacred land and even the sacred race? Another Heavenly Eye clan supreme sneered. Haha, aren't you afraid of biting your tongue? The supremes all roared with laughter. He really did kill the sacred race, and he killed 4 of them. At this moment, Gu Sha's voice sounded. The smiles of the supremes froze on their faces, and the laughter around them gradually faded. Gu Sha stared at Su Zimo and said faintly, Su Zimo, you are finally willing to come out? Gu Sha was among the experts who attacked the chaotic sacred land back then. Chapter 33:30. Who is Su Zimo? I think I've heard of him somewhere before. I remember now. The current owner of the chaotic sacred land is Su Zimo. Discussions broke out among the crowd in the forbidden land of time and space. Supreme Gu Sha sneered. You didn't hide in the chaotic sacred land and came to me yourself. Don't blame me for what I'm going to do. The grudge between us can be settled any time. Su Zimo's expression was normal. He glanced at the hundreds of human supremes around the Stone of Life and said, but before that, let them leave first. Humph. A stone tribe supreme snorted. Even if you're the master of chaos, you don't have that much face. This group of supremes had just fought with the fishermen and the human supremes. Both sides had suffered casualties. How could they let them go so easily? Brother Su, misty, leave quickly. Don't worry about us. The chef shouted. However, under Gu Sha's signal, a group of supremes had already surrounded them and blocked Su Zimo and Dayu's escape route. Interesting. Supreme Gu Sha chuckled. You can't even protect yourself, and you still want to meddle in other people's business. You must be tired of living. Are you not going to let them go? Su Zimo looked around and only received cold and mocking gazes. Then who lives and who dies? That might not be the case. Su Zimo muttered softly, acting all mysterious. Kneel down. 2 supremes attacked. One of them controlled the great Tao, and his aura was deep and unfathomable. It was also like a mountain. It weighed more than 10,000 pounds. The great Tao of heavens might descended. The other supreme being's figure was like a specter. They disappeared instantly. They moved stealthily in Dayu's direction. The great Tao of ghosts. Under such pressure, Su Zimo only needed to circulate his qi and blood slightly. Then, he dissolved it. Then, he moved and instantly appeared in front of this person. He flipped his palm. He slapped the top of this person's head. You. This supreme being was greatly shocked. He didn't expect that his great Tao of heavens might seem to have no effect on Su Zimo. By the time Su Zimo reached him, it was already too late for him to dodge. This paragon once again controlled the great Tao of heaven's might, circling around his arms, wanting to block Su Zimo's palm strike. Bang! Fist and arm collided. A muffled sound rang out, as if they had been defeated. Ka. Before anyone could react, the ear-piercing sound of bones cracking rang out. The arm of this sovereign was broken. It was broken by Su Zimo's palm. In front of Su Zimo, this autarch's heavenly might, great Tao and physical body were both in front of him. Unable to withstand a single blow, the palm slammed down. It only paused for a moment before it broke through the obstruction. It landed on the sovereign's head. It was shattered into pieces. His primordial spirit was also destroyed. Death of body and Tao. A supreme being was unable to withstand a single blow from Su Zimo. What was even more terrifying was that Su Zimo didn't even control the great Tao that he cultivated. He only relied on his physical body and bloodline. He killed a supreme being with a slap. Those who could calm their physical body and bloodline and forcefully resist the great Tao. Perhaps only the sacred clans of the various sacred grounds could do it. All the supreme being experts present. Most of them didn't put Su Zimo in their eyes. It was none other than because Su Zimo's cultivation realm wasn't high. However, he had already fused with the Qinglian of creation, the red lotus of hellfire, and the golden lotus of merit. His bloodline were even stronger than the sacred clans of the same level. Especially after fusing with the golden lotus of merit, his physical strength soared. He had already reached the immortal realm, a flawless, unparalleled realm. On the other side, the supreme being who cultivated the great Tao of ghosts came to Dai Yu's side. Dai Yu didn't seem to notice. She still didn't move. However, the moment this supreme being attacked, beside Dai Yu, a storm was suddenly stirred up and engulfed this supreme being. This supreme being let out a miserable scream. In the blink of an eye, he was torn apart by this storm that appeared out of nowhere. His body and soul were destroyed. The great Tao of wind, the fisherman, the woodcutter, and the others weren't worried about Dai Yu. They knew this Dai Yu's combat strength. In fact, she was even stronger than them. What they were most worried about was still Su Zimo. No matter what, Su Zimo was only at the small success stage of the Tao manipulation realm. And now, there were far too many supreme beings gathered under the 5 sacred lands. More than 300,000 of them, densely packed, blotting out the sun. Only when one was in the situation and faced with such a terrifying battle array could one feel the suffocating sense of oppression. The many humans around Xian Ku Mountain were also nervous, their hearts hanging high as they stared unblinkingly at the great battle that was about to erupt in the forbidden land of space-time. The gap between the two sides was too great. There were only 2 people. How could they save the hundreds of human supreme beings inside? Supreme being Gusha smiled and declared, "Whoever can kill these 2, I will give them a chance to join the space-time sacred land." The eyes of all the supreme beings present lit up when they heard this. Who didn't want to join the 5 sacred lands? As long as one became a member of the sacred lands, regardless of status or identity, they would be above all the other races. In the future, they would be able to do as they pleased in the vast 1,000 domains. These words stirred the hearts of countless supreme beings. Even the supreme beings who had originally planned to stay out of the matter and watch with folded arms felt a hint of hostility when they saw Su Zimo and Dai Yu. Careful. Su Zimo looked at Dai Yu and warned her. Then, he moved and charged at Supreme Being Gusha. There were too many Supreme Beings around. No matter how strong Su Zimo was, he could not kill everyone. Only by killing a member of the sacred lands would he be able to intimidate the Supreme Beings of the other races. Kill him. The surrounding Supreme Beings reacted, controlling their great Taos and releasing their Tao weapons. Su Zimo's blood energy surged as 3 lotus flowers appeared behind him, transforming into 3 heads and 6 arms. Each of them held a jade scepter, the Tai Horsetail whisk, the living soil of the nine heavens, the karmic fire lotus platform. Wielding the Avicii and Netherworld swords, he charged into the crowd. As soon as the two sides clashed, Zemo erupted with all his strength, holding nothing back. He knew that Yu was facing the same situation as well. The only way he could have a chance of resolving today's situation was to release his full strength right away and kill the supreme beings of the other races with thunderous methods. 3 lotus flowers grew behind Zemo and surged into the skies, as though they were about to burst through the world. Each lotus flower corresponded to one of Zemo's heads and arms. In front of the supreme beings of the other races, Qinglian's bloodline had already displayed its might. The bloodlines of the supreme beings of the various races were clearly suppressed against Zemo, and some of them could not even release their bloodline phenomenons. Poof, poof, poof. Zemo charged into the crowd and relied solely on the power of his blood chi and the sharpness of the Avicii and Netherworld swords to kill. Everywhere he passed, a blood mist would spread and corpses would be left behind. The Avicii sword was the sharpest, and any Dao weapon that collided with it would shatter instantly. If it landed on the supreme beings of the other races, the Avicii hell would appear and drag their essence spirits into it with a sinister aura. The Netherworld sword was the #1 killer. As long as it left a single wound on the supreme beings of the other races, even if it was just a superficial wound, it was enough to claim their lives. End of chapter. Chapter 33-31. Wherever the 3-headed and 6-armed Zemo passed, broken limbs flew everywhere. It was as if he had entered a no-man's land. He cut the Supremes into pieces and charged out a bloody path. The Supremes of the myriad races, no one could block Zemo's sword. Many Supremes were willing to gather under the 5 great sacred grounds, mainly to protect themselves. But now, the Supremes of the myriad races saw that they would lose their lives against Zemo. Who would be stupid enough to rush forward and die? Although the opportunity to join the sacred grounds was precious, one had to be alive. Zemo held the Avicii and Netherworld swords in his hands and started a massacre, causing a rain of blood. It had indeed caused a huge impact and shock to the Supremes of the myriad races. In just a dozen breaths of time, the number of sovereign stage experts blocking his path had already thinned out. Most of the Supremes avoided him. This scene looked extremely strange. It was clearly an army of 300,000 Supremes, but they were forcefully dispersed by a figure. In the eyes of the living beings from all over the world, this scene was even more shocking. Dozens of Supremes gathered together, like a torrent of steel, but they were forcefully cut off by someone. Supreme Gu Sha and the other experts of the 5 great sacred grounds did not take Zemo seriously at all. Back then, Zemo only dared to hide in the chaos sacred ground, relying on that chaos array to fight the enemy. In their opinion, even if Zemo had stepped into the Dao-controlling realm, he was still 2 realms away from them. Moreover, they still had hundreds of thousands of Supremes under their command, with a single order. Even if it was a battle of attrition, they could still exhaust him to death. But Supreme Gu Sha and the others had still underestimated Zemo, underestimated the terror of the Avicii and Netherworld swords. Wherever the sword passed, it was invincible. Zemo followed the sword. He tore through the crowd and drove straight in, not long after. He had already arrived in front of Supreme Gu Sha and the others. It came too quickly. When Supreme Gu Sha and the others realized that something was wrong, they had already met Zemo. The Supremes of the sacred grounds did not dare to be careless. They all released their chi and blood to control the great Dao. They took out their Dao weapons. They attacked Zemo from all sides. As members of the Holy Land, they had no choice but to accept. Naturally, he would not retreat so easily. Furthermore, the supreme being experts of the 5 great holy lands. In total, there were thousands of them. There were no forces involved to be able to contend against it. Not to mention Zemo, who was alone. Facing the siege of so many sovereigns of the Holy Land, Qin Wentian had no choice but to take action. Zemo did not stop walking. The aura in his body rose once again, and his strength soared. His eyes were like torches as he shouted, "You want my life? You guys are still far from it." Su Zimo also controlled the Chaos Great Tao. Strands of Chaos Chi surrounded his body and attached themselves to the Avicii and Netherworld swords. The three-headed and six-armed Su Zimo. Once again, he charged into the crowd. Against the supreme experts of other races, Su Zimo did not even release the Great Tao of Chaos. If it weren't for the fact that there were too many supreme martial artists, he was only relying on his body and bloodline that had fused with the three lotuses. It was enough to sweep through them. Now, against the various Holy Land Supremes, Su Zimo released the Great Tao of Chaos and unleashed his strength to the extreme. Clang, clang, clang. Puff, puff, puff. The Tao weapons of the various Holy Land Supremes. They could not block the sharpness of the Avicii and Netherworld swords. No matter what divine weapon it was, when it collided with it, it would either break directly or shatter into pieces. The Great Tao controlled by the various supreme experts was also forcefully cut off by Su Zimo's two swords. When he was at the perfected Tao comprehension realm, if he wanted to break through the supreme expert's Great Tao, Su Zimo had to use the spirit potency art to summon Wu Dao's true body to find the flaws and weaknesses of the other party's Great Tao. After stepping into the Tao manipulation realm, Su Zimo relied on his own strength. He could use the Avicii and Netherworld swords to cut off the other party's Great Tao. Blood filled the air. It dyed the sky red. Even the Supremes of the sacred grounds could not defend against Su Zimo's attacks. Su Zimo charged forward as if he was cutting melons and vegetables. The various Holy Land Supremes were completely defeated. They wailed like ghosts and howled like wolves. Supreme Gu Sha had also become the soul of Su Zimo's swordsman. Although there were many Supremes, when they saw this scene, their faces were filled with shock. Their faces were pale, and a chill rose from the bottom of their hearts. How could they dare to rashly step forward? Even the lives of the supreme experts of the 5 Holy Lands were like grass under Su Zimo's sword. Even if they swarmed forward, it would probably not be enough. In fact, if these more than 300,000 supreme experts were really fearless of death and constantly besieged, Su Zimo would not be able to hold on. After all, he was only at the initial stage of the Tao manipulation realm. No matter how strong Qinglian's body was, her strength was not endless. There was no end. Unfortunately, the Supremes of the 10,000 races were completely stunned by Su Zimo's killing methods just now. At this moment, all the supreme experts were praying that Su Zimo would not find them. Who would dare to rashly challenge Su Zimo? Isn't this too strong? As expected of the Master of Chaos, so powerful. When the human Supremes saw this scene, their faces were filled with shock and their mouths agape. They were already shocked when Dai Yu rushed over and joined the battlefield. She controlled the great Tao of wind and fought against the supreme experts of the 4 directions. However, the man named Su Zimo had single-handedly slaughtered his way through an army of 300,000 supreme martial artists. The supreme beings of the 5 great holy lands had all been beaten by him until they threw away their helmets and armor, suffering a crushing defeat. In the end, no one dared to step forward. A large bloody zone was formed around Su Zimo. Other than him standing with his sword, everyone else was dead on the spot. Under the Avicii and Netherworld swords, there were no casualties, only dead souls. On the other side, Su Zimo was invincible and killed his way through the 5 holy lands, reducing the pressure on Dai Yu, the fishermen, and the other supremes of the human race. The supreme beings of the various races who were initially besieging them could not help but think about it. This blood-robed woman came hand in hand with the Master of Chaos. If they hurt her, wouldn't the Master of Chaos want their lives? The attacks of the Supreme Being experts also gradually became restrained, as they were afraid of hurting Dai Yu. Their attacks gradually weakened. This Tao companion of yours is truly ferocious. The chef panted and could not help but praise with a hearty laugh. When we return to the village, I'll cook a table full of delicious dishes for you guys. Near Shinmi Mountain, many of the human cultivators were elated at the sight of this. The supreme beings of the 10,000 races gathered together with a terrifying aura that suppressed them to the point of suffocation. Despair was the only thing left in their hearts when they saw that hundreds of human supreme beings were about to be wiped out. To think that the situation would be reversed the moment a man and woman entered the forbidden zone of time and space. Saints Jiang Chao and Hui Ming heaved a sigh of relief as well. The guilt in their hearts lessened when they saw that hundreds of human supreme beings could be saved. Those two fellow Taoists are unfamiliar and weren't famous previously. To think that they would possess such frightening combat strength. It's truly the fortune of the human race. He's the master of chaos and the plant race. What does he have to do with the human race? How is he unrelated? He's a Tao companion of the human race and is on our side. Furthermore, I have a feeling that I've seen those two somewhere before. They seem especially familiar. To be honest, I find them familiar as well. Who knows, I might have met them once before. Stop flattering yourselves. A series of laughter came from the crowd and everyone's initially tense nerves gradually relaxed. Lin Xuanji was the only one who murmured softly, "It's normal to be familiar." Chapter 33-32. The space-time forbidden land was in chaos. The hundreds of thousands of Supremes who had gathered under the 5 sacred grounds were also scattered by Su Zimo's charge as they hurriedly made way for him. The 5 holy lands also suffered a lot of casualties. Su Zimo knew in his heart that he could not stay here for long. Seeing this situation, the Supremes of the 5 holy lands would definitely not stand by and watch. Of course, if only 1 or 2 Supremes intervened, it would not be a big threat to him. Su Zimo was only worried that the situation would go out of control and cause an even bigger disaster. Let's go. Su Zimo did not continue to chase after the Supremes of the 5 holy lands. He turned around and came to Dai Yu and the others. When the Supremes who had besieged them saw Su Zimo return, they were frightened and did not dare to stop him. They scattered. "Su Zimo, how dare you? You killed my holy lands people and still want to escape unscathed. Today, all of you will be buried here with us." A fierce shout suddenly sounded from the end of the sky. In the next moment, figures appeared from 5 directions in the space-time forbidden land and were rushing towards this place. The Supremes of the 5 holy lands had appeared. In addition to Heavenfall, Qing Yong, 9 Shadows, and Wood Unicorn, who he had met once in the Chaos Holy Land, there were 8 other Supremes. The conditions to become a holy race were extremely harsh. The holy race was rare. 12 Supremes of the holy race descended at the same time. It was a rare scene. These 12 Supremes of the holy race. Each of them was once an invincible Supremes who had ruled for at least 100 million years under the Saint Realm. However, because of the great Tao they cultivated, there had long been saints occupying it. They had not been able to become saints all these years. Master. Seeing these Supremes of the holy race appear, the Supremes of the 5 holy lands seemed to have seen their saviors. They all crowded towards the 12 Supremes of the holy race. It's the Heavenfall Saint, the Kuanpeng bloodline, the Wood Unicorn Saint. It is said that this is an extremely rare wood unicorn. He cultivates the great Tao of life. No matter how serious the injury, he can recover. The Saintess of Azure Sky is also here. Heavens, these are the Supremes of the holy race back then. If the saints don't come out, it's these experts who patrol the myriad races and punish them on behalf of the heavens. In the great 1,000 worlds, if the saints did not appear, the sacred race's Supremes were almost the most powerful existences. These sacred race autarchs had all sorts of reasons. He couldn't step into the saint realm, but to the myriad races he was also a powerful existence that couldn't be blasphemed against. The living beings of the myriad races would usually address them as holy sons. The saintess was a sign of respect. Besides the war between the 5 holy lands and the 4 Taos in the 33 heavens, this had never happened before. Everyone, heed my command. The Skyfall Holy Sun looked around and said in a deep voice, "Leave this Su Zimo to us. The rest of you, go all out and kill those human Supremes. Don't leave a single one alive." The Skyfall Sage wasn't just speaking to the people of the sacred land. It was also an order to the Supremes of the myriad races scattered around. As a matter of fact, The bloody battle that had just taken place was a bloody one. The autarchs of the various races were already terrified of Suzimo. But now, the 12 saints and saintesses had arrived. They didn't dare to disobey such an order. Moreover, as long as the 12 saints and saintesses suppressed Suzimo, however, the hundreds of human supremes were nothing to be afraid of. Kill. Almost at the moment the Skyfall Sage gave the order, Suzimo also let out a long roar. In the state of 3 heads and 6 arms, he controlled the Avicii and Netherworld swords. He charged toward the 12 saints and saintesses. As long as these 12 people were killed, the rest would collapse without a fight. The Skyfall Sage faced Suzimo, who was charging toward him. Their expressions were solemn, and they didn't show the slightest bit of contempt. They had just been in the various sacred lands. They had witnessed the terror of the Avicii and Netherworld swords with their own eyes. This time, they had come. Naturally, they were already prepared. Go. The Skyfall Sage took out a ray of bloodlight. He threw it into the air and turned it into a blood-colored banner, filled with a faint smell of blood. At the same time, the 12 saints and saintesses bit the tip of their tongues at the same time and spat out a mouthful of blood essence. They sprinkled it on the banner and injected it into their souls. In the next moment, the 12 saints and saintesses established a connection with the blood banner at the same time. They felt a strange, bloody, and incomparably powerful power in this blood banner. The 12 saints and saintesses controlled this blood banner at the same time, constantly swaying in front of Suzimo. In an instant, blood energy surged. It was as if a blood river had appeared between heaven and earth, surging towards Suzimo, wanting to swallow him. Suzimo felt a strong sense of danger. The power contained in this blood river. It was definitely not something he could resist. It was also impossible for a Dao manipulation realm expert to control it. This power probably came from the Saint realm. Suzimo hurriedly stopped his body, holding the 2 swords in front of him, and retreated at the same time. However, the blood river kept roaring, and its speed was even faster. In an instant, it approached Suzimo, wanting to swallow him. The surging river had already swallowed the Avicii and Netherworld swords. These 2 divine swords had never been suppressed since they fell into Suzimo's hands. However, at this moment, in the face of this blood river, the sharp murderous aura of the Avicii and Netherworld swords seemed to have faded a little, and the trembling swords also calmed down. A powerful devouring force burst forth from the blood river, wanting to swallow Suzimo and the Avicii and Netherworld swords together. Suzimo could not resist it and could only let go of his hand, allowing the blood river to swallow the Avicii and Netherworld swords. However, after swallowing the 2 swords, the blood river also reverted to its original form, returning to the appearance of a blood banner, floating in midair. No matter how the 12 saints and saintesses tried to control it, this blood banner did not move at all. Swallowing the Avicii and Netherworld swords had also consumed a lot of the blood banner's energy. It could not be distracted at the moment and seemed to be trying to suppress the Avicii and Netherworld swords. The 12 saints and saintesses looked at each other and heaved a sigh of relief. To them, the biggest threat was the Avicii and Netherworld swords. As long as they could control these 2 divine swords, only Suzimo was left, and there was nothing to be afraid of. Near Shinmi Mountain, seeing this scene, everyone became nervous again. It actually alarmed the 12 saints and saintesses. What kind of treasure is that blood banner? How can it be so powerful that it requires the 12 saints and saintesses to activate it at the same time? It seems that these saints and saintesses are also very wary of those 2 swords. While everyone was discussing, Saint Jiangqiao and Saint Huiming stared at the blood banner, frowning. The 2 saints seemed to have thought of something, but they were not sure. They turned to the Mountain Elder and could not help but ask Mountain Elder, "That blood banner seems to be..." "That's the Saint blood banner." The Mountain Elder still had a bitter expression. The soul-summoning saint's saint artifact was borrowed by these juniors. Hearing this, everyone was shocked and angry. What is this? The saint intervened in a conflict between Dao manipulation realm cultivators. How shameless are the 5 sacred grounds! Although they did not directly attack, it can be considered as an indirect intervention. It's not like we humans don't have saints. Many cultivators subconsciously looked at the two saints Jiangxiao and Huiming. The two saints looked troubled as they shook their heads and sighed. They had just become saints, and their natal spiritual treasures had not merged with the great Tao to be forged into saint artifacts. Moreover, even if they were forged into saint artifacts and lent to Su Zimo, it would be difficult for him to unleash the power of the saint artifacts. And the two of them could not directly descend and intervene just because of a saint artifact. That would only give others an advantage and cause more trouble. End of chapter. Chapter 33. The appearance of the 12 saints and saintesses and the saint blood banner to suppress the Avicii and Netherworld swords was a great relief for the Supremes. They had just witnessed the terror of the Avicii and Netherworld swords. If Su Zimo still had these two swords in his hands, who would dare to step forward? Now, under the command of the 12 saints and saintesses, the Supremes who had just been scattered all over the place gathered here again. Su Zimo looked solemn. He had already lost his perception of the Avicii and Netherworld swords. This was something that had never happened before. From this, one could infer the power of the blood banner. And without the Avicii and Netherworld swords, his combat strength would be greatly reduced. It was almost impossible for him to fight against the Supremes by himself. Moreover, the 12 saints and saintesses were eyeing him covetously. Under the command of the heaven-falling Holy Sun and the others, the Supremes of the various clans gathered together and charged towards the human clan Supremes like an apocalyptic torrent. The 12 saints and saintesses also surrounded Su Zimo and attacked at the same time. Seeing this scene, many Supreme Being experts were secretly speechless. Since ancient times, there had never been a prime martial artist who had been besieged by 12 saints and saintesses. Moreover, this master of chaos was not a Supremes, but a Tao master at the initial Tao manipulation realm. The saints and saintesses, no matter who they were, had once stood tall in the long river of time and were invincible among their peers. They were supreme existences. And now, the 12 saints and saintesses had joined forces. How terrifying this scene was. The 12 great Taos manifested in the hands of the saints and saintesses, transforming into countless divine weapons and attacking Su Zimo. Even without the Avicii and Netherworld swords, Su Zimo was not afraid at all. At this moment, he had merged the creation, hellfire, and merit lotuses. Even without the Avicii and Netherworld swords, his combat strength was not weaker than any Supremes. The 3 lotuses that connected heaven and earth flickered with different splendor and swayed gently. The chaotic light spread out, evolving into layers of ripples that rippled in all directions. Su Zimo, in the state of 3 heads and 6 arms, exerted his combat strength to the extreme and broke out in a fierce battle with the 12 saints and saintesses. Boom, boom, boom. Their vital blood, grand das, bodies, and numinous treasures collided ceaselessly in midair, causing a wave of deafening bangs to resound. At this level of cultivation, there were no longer any complicated or profound divine abilities or forbidden arts, nor were there any fancy moves. Every movement was a struggle for the great Tao. The 12 saint sons and saintesses were secretly frightened. They originally thought that as long as they suppressed the Avicii and Netherworld swords, they would be able to easily kill Su Zimo with their combined strength. But in the face of their siege, Su Zimo did not show any signs of defeat. Instead, the more he fought, the braver he became. He dared not imagine how terrifying this person's combat strength would be if he had the Avicii and Netherworld twin swords in his hands. Perhaps the 12 holy sons and holy daughters would all die here. The atavistic bloodline flowed in their bodies. Even so, he could not suppress Su Zimo's vitality. Of course, the 12 saints and saintesses were joining forces after all. It would be extremely difficult for Su Zimo to break free and reverse the situation. The current battle situation was still firmly in their hands. Moreover, on the other side of the battlefield, the group of human supremes would not be able to hold on for long. Su Zimo obviously noticed this as well. His attacks did not stop, but his expression became colder and colder, and his eyes flickered with a trace of coldness. Su Zimo, surrender. It's meaningless to continue fighting. You can't escape death. You're alone against the sacred race. No one among the thousands of races will dare to help you. The 12 holy sons and saintesses were still pressuring Su Zimo. Fight. At this moment, a furious roar sounded between heaven and earth. It was as deafening as a sudden clap of thunder. Boom. In the next moment, a thick and long staff descended from the sky. It was suffused with golden light and smashed into the crowd, causing the earth to shake and mountains to shake. Some Supremes could not dodge in time and were smashed to death by the staff, turning into a pool of flesh and blood. When Gu Cheng heard this familiar voice, Su Zimo's eyes shone brightly, and his spirits were lifted. Monkey was here. Who said that no one among the thousands of races would dare to help him? A tall figure stood at the top of the long staff. His body was covered in long hair, his arms were extremely long, and he had 6 ears. His eyes were bloodshot, and his aura was torrential. With an arrogant expression, he stared at the battlefield below and shouted, "I'm going to help him." The 12 holy sons and saintesses frowned when their gazes landed on Monkey. It was him? The shrewd monkey of the Chaos Fiend ape race. The 12 holy sons and saintesses had heard of this monkey. The Chaos Fiend ape was a unique existence among the thousands of races. Originally, only one was born in this world, and this Chaos Fiend ape was known as the Great Sage of Chaos. Tens of thousands of years ago, it was said that a second Chaos Fiend ape ascended in the middle world and was received by the Great Sage of Chaos. The Great Sage of Chaos was unruly and had always been a lone wolf. Even the sages of the 5 sacred grounds were respectful towards him. The Great Sage of Chaos had obtained an inheritor who could awaken his bloodline. One could imagine how much he valued this inheritor. The 5 sacred grounds had heard that this inheritor was known as the demonic battle ape, but they had never seen him before. Now, it was their first time meeting him. The 12 holy sons and saintesses were not afraid of this demonic battle ape. It was just that if they really killed this demonic battle ape, the Great Sage of Chaos behind him would be alarmed. Over the countless years, the chaotic world demonic ape clan only had a total of 2. If this demonic battle ape died in their hands, the other would definitely go crazy. If the Great Sage of Chaos went crazy, only the sacred leaders could suppress him. Supremacy battle, I don't want to be enemies with you. The Sky Rising Saint said in a low voice, for my sake, don't interfere in today's matter. Your face is nothing. The monkey had a disdainful expression as he spat. You think you can rely on your numbers to call yourselves holy sons and saintesses? A bunch of shameless things. These words were extremely unpleasant. The expressions of the 12 holy sons and saintesses darkened instantly. As supremacies of the sacred race, they had once reigned supreme throughout history and were invincible below the saint realm. When had they ever suffered such humiliation? Supremacy battle. Qing Yong narrowed his eyes and said coldly, "We're just unwilling to fight with you. It's not that we're afraid of you. Don't be ignorant. I'll give you a piece of advice. Don't meddle in other people's business." 9 shadows let out an ear-piercing cry of an infant. Ha 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 ha. Monkey grinned and leaped down from the rod, scolding, "Who do you think you are to give me advice?" Monkey looked at Su Zimo in the crowd. The man and Monkey exchanged glances and could see the joy in the other party's eyes. From Tsanglang Mountain Range to Tianhuang Mainland, from the middle world to the greater world, the 2 brothers had braved through life and death. There was no need for words between them. They were already mentally connected. Monkey's eyes seemed to turn even redder as he shouted, "Boss, let's fight side by side today and kill to our heart's content." "All right." Su Zimo shouted as well. "Let's fight to our heart's content today as brothers." In a daze, the 2 of them seemed to have returned to Tsanglang Mountain Range and recalled the days when they fought side by side. The world had changed and the world had changed. The only thing that did not change was their initial passion and sincerity that transcended race, life and death, and everything else. Chapter 33-34. Suzimo and Monkey reunited in the forbidden zone of time and space of the Supreme World. Back to back, they joined forces and fought against the 12 saints and saintesses. However, against Suzimo alone, the 12 saints and saintesses could still suppress him. Now that Monkey had joined the fray, the man and Monkey began to counterattack and showed signs of breaking free from the encirclement. Monkey was brought to the Supreme World by the Great Sage of Chaos early on. Furthermore, it was the second Chaos Fiend ape in the world. It was obvious how highly the Great Sage of Chaos valued it. The Great Sage of Chaos spent almost all his effort to nurture Monkey. Although the saints of the various sacred grounds were rare, they would not receive guidance from the Great Sage, and their resources were relatively scattered. However, the Great Sage of Chaos only needed to guide Monkey. For countless years, the Great Sage of Chaos's cultivation experience and all the treasures and resources accumulated were all piled up on Monkey. It was no exaggeration to say that Monkey's cultivation environment was even better than that of the saints of the various sacred grounds. Under such circumstances, Monkey's cultivation realm could advance by leaps and bounds and reach the perfected Tao manipulation realm. As a supreme, Monkey's combat strength was not weaker than the paragons of the various saints. The bloodline of the Chaos Fiend ape was not disadvantaged at all against the bloodlines of the various saints. Of course, it was still far from enough for the man and Monkey to suppress the 12 saints and saintesses. Those who could be called saints and saintesses were all supreme paragons who dominated the ancient times. None of them were easy to deal with. As time passed by, the situation became increasingly disadvantageous for the human race. Suzimo and Monkey could still hold on, but Daiyu and the hundreds of human paragons could not defend against the attacks of the paragons of the 10,000 races. Suzimo roared and his blood chi surged. Monkey and he were telepathic. The two of them worked together and burst forth with all their might, breaking through the encirclement of the 12 saints and saintesses. They charged into the crowd and gathered in the direction of Daiyu and the others. Poof, poof. Apart from the 12 saints and saintesses, none of the supreme experts in midair were a match for Suzimo and Monkey. Everywhere they passed, corpses were strewn everywhere. The man and Monkey's auras were like rainbows. They were like two sharp swords as they tore through the crowd of supreme beings of 10,000 races, tearing through mountains of corpses and seas of blood, arriving near the Stone of Life. The 12 holy sons and holy daughters followed closely behind, chasing after him like shadows. It was impossible for Suzimo and the Monkey to come out unscathed. There were wounds all over their bodies, dripping with blood. The two of them seemed to be completely unaware of it. Suzimo circulated his bloodline as his wounds healed rapidly. The wounds on Monkey's body petrified rapidly as well. After seeing blood, the sanguine glint in his eyes intensified and his aura turned even more violent. The supremes of all races were gathered under the command of the 12 saints and saintesses. There were too many of them. Hundreds of supreme being experts had died in their hands during the earlier battle. However, compared to the hundreds of thousands of supreme beings, it was almost negligible. As long as the 12 holy sons and holy daughters didn't die, the supremes of the myriad races wouldn't retreat under their call. Without the Avicii and Netherworld swords, Suzimo was unable to kill the 12 holy sons and saintesses, unless he summoned the spirit potency art and summoned Wu Dao's true body. However, if he did that, his identity as Araki Takashi would be exposed, and it would cause even more chaos. Bang, bang, bang. Under the command of the 12 holy sons and saintesses, the supremes of the myriad races controlled their great Daos and condensed countless Dao soldiers that descended from the skies like rain. Under such circumstances, Suzimo was the only one who could protect himself with the 9 heavens breath soil and many other treasures. Even Monkey and Daiyu could not withstand it, let alone the other supreme beings of the human race. More and more human supreme beings were severely injured and lost their combat strength. Rise! Gui shouted. Suzimo bit the tip of his tongue and spat out a stream of essence blood onto the Merit Lotus platform before tossing it out. The Merit Lotus platform rose rapidly and hovered above the heads of the human supreme beings. It spun slowly and bloomed with a brilliant golden light. The merit golden lotus was indestructible and was an extreme defensive treasure. The higher one's merit, the greater the defense of the merit lotus platform. As for Suzimo, he had once taught martial arts to all living beings, quelled the chaos of the primordial races, and suppressed the blood fiend calamity. In the middle world, he had even led the living beings of the myriad races to crush the heavenly courts and the 9 heavens. Every single thing he did was accumulating unparalleled merit. That was the reason why the merit golden lotus was able to temporarily block the attacks of the supreme beings of the myriad races and give the human supreme beings a chance to catch their breaths. However, the attacks of the supreme beings of the myriad races did not stop, and the merit was being depleted continuously. As time passed by, the merit golden lotus swayed continuously from the attacks, and its golden light flickered, as though it could fall at any moment. "Brother Su, leave. Don't bother about us." The woodcutter wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and panted. "That's right. If you continue like this, you'll die here as well. If you leave this place and survive, the human race will have a future." Many supreme beings of the human race spoke as well. They were severely injured and could not get up from the ground. It was impossible for them to escape death. However, they did not want to implicate Suzimo and the others. Suzimo's expression darkened, and he did not say anything. The 3 lotus flowers swayed and shone brightly. His 6 arms supported the merit golden lotus, and his veins popped as he defended against the attacks of the supreme beings of the myriad races. The power in his body was already pushed to its limits. Bang, bang, bang. The attacks of the supreme beings of the myriad races were endless. Although the merit golden lotus neutralized a lot of damage, there was still endless power that passed through the merit golden lotus and into Suzimo's 6 arms. With each impact, Suzimo's body would tremble. A trace of blood seeped out from the corner of his lips as well. Roar! Monkey pounded his chest and stomped his feet. He raised the rod in his hands vertically and pressed it beneath the merit golden lotus, wanting to help Suzimo support it. However, under that suffocating pressure, his long staff was also bending bit by bit, emitting a series of horrifying cracking sounds. The moment Monkey's hands touched the rod, he felt the terrifying power, and the flesh on his arms exploded instantly, sending him flying in a bloody mess. The merit golden lotus was like the sky above everyone's heads that was still sinking bit by bit. Daiyu and the other supreme beings of the human race who still had combat strength rushed forward one after another. They controlled their great Daos and supported their arms, wanting to help Suzimo support it. However, as soon as the crowd's hands touched the virtuous golden lotus, they felt a surging power coming from above. The power was way too massive, like the vast starry skies or the vast ocean. They were like small boats in the raging sea that would be engulfed by the waves in the blink of an eye. Poof! In less than a single breath, the supreme beings of the human race could not hold on any longer. As though they were struck by lightning, they spat out mouthfuls of blood and collapsed to the ground limply. Everyone looked at Suzimo in shock. It was only at this moment that they realized what sort of pressure and impact Suzimo was enduring right now. That man was resisting the power and wills of the supreme beings of the myriad races single-handedly. That body looked so frail and weak. However, his spine was straight and his feet were spread apart, rooted in the ground like a towering human character. It was majestic and held up the swaying sky for them. Chapter 33-35. It was not only the supremes of the human race. Even the supremes of the myriad races who attacked could not conceal their shock when they saw this scene. The 12 saints and saintesses looked down at the scene with cold expressions. They knew that Suzimo could not win at all. The Saint of Heaven Rising Saint raised his voice. "Suzimo, you truly don't know what's good for you to fight against the supremes of the myriad races single-handedly. Can you withstand the will of the myriad races?" Qing Yong hollered as well. The attacks of the supremes of the myriad races became increasingly ferocious. As for the merit on the merit golden lotus, it was gradually depleted and was sinking slowly. This power was way too strong. As the saints said, the merit golden lotus carried the power of the myriad races and the will of the myriad races. How could it be withstood by a single person? Suzimo was still in the posture of holding up the merit golden lotus. However, his 6 arms were bending continuously. The bottom of the virtuous golden lotus was almost touching the top of his head. A tremendous pressure transmitted over and Suzimo's face flushed red. The veins on his neck popped and the sleeves on his arms had long been torn. Even he had no choice but to lower his head. The merit golden lotus landed slowly on his back. Suzimo shuddered and swayed slightly as he spat out a mouthful of blood. However, he did not let go. Although he lowered his head, his spine was still straight. Monkey's rod was bent into an exaggerated arc from the pressure, as though it could snap at any moment. Brother Su, hurry and escape. Don't bother about us. As long as you're alive, there's hope for the human race. The fisherman, woodcutter, and the others said loudly. Those words sounded strange to the supremes of the human race. Suzimo was clearly the master of chaos. Why would there be hope for the human race if he survived? However, no one was in the mood to think about that under such circumstances. Suzimo remained silent, and his expression was frighteningly dark. Behind him were hundreds of supremes of the human race. If he retreated, the hundreds of supremes of the human race would be instantly drowned by the attacks of the supremes of the 10,000 races and be reduced to dust. Monkey grimaced in pain as he stood up. The bloody light in his eyes had dimmed significantly as he limped to Suzimo's side. Even if they were to die, they would die together. Daiyu's face was pale as she came to Suzimo's side with a determined look in her eyes. Even now, she had never regretted coming to the forbidden area of time and space. Hundreds of human race supremes supported each other and struggled to stand up. Facing the supremes of all races, they stood with their heads held high, fearless in the face of death. Near Xianmi Mountain, hundreds of millions of humans had gathered here, stretching as far as the eye could see, looking up at this scene in the forbidden zone of space-time. Some of them were filled with grief and indignation. Some of them had tears in their eyes. There were also some who didn't dare to look anymore. They lowered their heads and wept softly. Anger, despair, moved, sorrow, powerlessness. All sorts of emotions reverberated in the air above Xianmi Mountain, pressing down on the humans to the point that they were almost unable to breathe. At this moment, the figure that fought against the 10,000 races seemed so tragic and stirring. Is there anyone else who can help him? Haitong's face was filled with tears and her voice trembled with a hint of sobbing. Saints, are you guys just going to watch Suzimo and the other human race supremes die? Saints, aren't you supposed to protect the human race? Many human cultivators looked at the 2 saints of the human race, Jiang Chao and Hui Ming, with a hint of pleading and hope in their eyes. The 2 saints, Jiang Chao and Hui Ming, lowered their heads in silence with guilty expressions. They were also extremely upset and pained in their hearts. Of course, they could not bear to do so. However, the 2 of them did not dare to break the balance and interfere in this matter. Even they themselves did not know if they were afraid that the 5 sacred grounds would vent their anger on the human race, or if they were afraid that they would be implicated and be stripped of their positions as saints. Mountain Elder, think of something. Many humans looked at the white-haired old man again. The Mountain Elder's expression was even more miserable as he gripped the tattered book tightly. His hands trembled slightly, but he did not say a word. If the great Emperor Araki Takashi of the human race is not dead, he will definitely ascend to the great Kiliacosm and definitely not allow the human race to be bullied by the 10,000 races. A human clenched his fists and suddenly said, over the years, Lin Xuanji had been traveling and telling stories everywhere. The legends of the Araki Takashi establishing the Tao and the various great emperors conquering the 9 heavens had long spread everywhere. Most of the humans present had heard of it. The last time the great Emperor Araki Takashi and the great Emperor Shuedai joined forces to conquer the heavens was even more memorable. Of course, the final outcome of the great Emperor Araki Takashi was also a pity. At this moment, when they saw the human race supremes being suppressed and bullied by the 10,000 races and facing a life-and-death crisis, everyone could not help but recall the legend of the great Emperor Araki Takashi. Many of the human cultivators present were in the martial monarch realm or above. However, everyone had great respect for the great Emperor Araki Takashi as well. The fact that the Araki Takashi established his Tao and imparted martial arts to all living beings was enough to earn the respect of many human experts. Furthermore, there was the conquering of the 9 heavens and the destruction of the heavenly courts, breaking the seal that the various sacred grounds had on the middle world for countless years. Even they did not dare to go against the sacred grounds. In the hearts of the humans, the great Emperor Araki Takashi was a symbol of courage to fight against all injustice. That was the reason why someone blurted out that if the great Emperor Araki Takashi was still around, he would definitely not allow the human race to be bullied. Lin Xuanji opened his mouth slightly and hesitated. In order to protect Su Zimo when he was telling the story, he naturally did not reveal that the great Emperor Araki Takashi was Su Zimo. Earlier on, he suddenly had the urge to tell everyone present about this. The great Emperor Araki Takashi was around the entire time. It was the great Emperor Araki Takashi who was resisting the power and will of the 10,000 races single-handedly. However, what was the use of that? Right then, something seemed to have happened in the battlefield of the forbidden space-time grounds. Right in front of countless gazes, the swaying figure that supported the Merit Golden Lotus suddenly stopped swaying. Su Zimo raised his head abruptly. 2 balls of bright and scorching purple flames were burning in his originally deep eyes. The 2 balls of purple flames were blinding. Even the 12 holy princes and saintesses felt their hearts skip a beat when they exchanged glances. In their senses, Su Zimo's aura was changing. It was as though he was a completely different person. He had turned into a terrifying existence that struck fear in their hearts. Roar! Suddenly, Su Zimo opened his mouth and let out a deafening roar that reverberated through the world. The next moment, a gigantic heaven and earth furnace appeared around him with raging flames that engulfed almost all the paragons of the 10,000 races. Of course, that was not the true heaven and earth furnace. After all, Wu Dao's true body could not truly descend with the help of the spirit potency art. However, at that moment, with the help of the spirit potency art, the 2 true bodies were connected mentally. Wu Dao's true body used the incomparably powerful and unshakable will of Wu Dao to conjure the terrifying image of the heaven and earth furnace that shocked all living beings. For the first time, Wu Dao's will descended into the greater world. Chapter 33-36. This is, why does this look like the heaven and earth furnace that the storyteller mentioned? There are purple flames in his eyes as well. Many human cultivators near Shinmi Mountain could not help but widen their eyes in disbelief when they saw that. Could that person be related to the great Emperor Araki Takashi? That red-robed woman looks like the legendary great Emperor Blood Butterfly. Many humans could not help but exclaim when they saw the heaven and earth furnace and Daiyu standing beside Su Zimo. Storyteller, what's going on? Many human cultivators asked hurriedly when they saw Lin Xuanji in the crowd. When Lin Xuanji saw Wu Dao's will descend, he realized that Su Zimo had decided not to hide his identity anymore. Since that was the case, there was no need for him to hide, and he said in a deep voice, "The true name of the great Emperor Araki Takashi is Su Zimo. Back then, the one who died in the War of the Heavens was his true body, Wu Dao." It's really the great Emperor Araki Takashi. Everyone was surprised and delighted. Lin Xuanji continued, "Furthermore, you guys guessed correctly. The red-robed woman beside him is the reincarnation of the great Emperor Blood Butterfly." At that point, everyone was invigorated. The great Emperor Araki Takashi and the great Emperor Blood Butterfly had already ascended to the greater world. Furthermore, right in front of everyone, they joined forces once more to fight against the 5 sacred grounds and the paragons of the 10,000 races, within the forbidden zone of time and space. After all, the 10,000 races were only barely united under the pressure of the sacred races and were not united. Wu Dao's will descended and conjured the heaven and earth furnace with raging flames. Even the wills of the 10,000 races could not defend against it and showed signs of collapsing. Of course, no matter how strong Wu Dao's will was, he could not neutralize the attacks of the paragons of the 10,000 races. Right then, more than 10 supreme experts sped over from afar with a murderous aura. The leader declared, "Master, we're here to help you." They were Evergreen, Huayan, and the other paragons of the Chaos Sacred Ground. Under such circumstances, those who dared to join the battle and stand on Su Zimo's side were already prepared to die. There were dozens of autarchs in the Primal Chaos Holy Land, but only a dozen of them dared to come and help Su Zimo. After all, there was a huge difference in strength between the two sides. Even with the help of Supreme Evergreen, Supreme Huayan, and the others, it would not affect the outcome of the battle too much. Stop them. The Skyfall Holy Sun merely glanced sideways and waved his sleeves, commanding the other Supremes to step forward and stop the Primal Chaos Holy Land Supremes. 3 saints moved and faced Supremacy Evergreen, Supremacy Hua Ruo, and Supremacy Huayan. Only these 3 possessed the bloodline of the Sacred Clan. The other autarchs of the Primal Chaos Sacred Land were nothing to fear. Ha 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 ha. So this is the Holy Son and Holy Daughter. How shameless. At this moment, a burst of laughter came from heaven and earth. Then, a figure stepped into the crowd and charged toward the Holy Sons and Holy Virgins. This person was Supremacy Xiemye, who had saved Su Zimo before. Supremacy Xiemye controlled the destruction Dao and destroyed everything in his path. Thousands of Daos shattered and turned into nothingness. Apart from the Sacred Clan Supremes, no one could stop Supremacy Xiemye's slaughter. Su Zimo's eyes turned and glanced at Supremacy Xiemye. This Supremacy Xiemye had once said that he would kill him when he stepped into the Dao-controlling realm. But now, he had chosen to come to the space-time Forbidden Land to help him fight against the myriad races. Sensing Su Zimo's gaze, Supremacy Xiemye sneered. "No need to thank me. I just can't stand these holy sons and holy virgins and wanted to kill a few to liven things up. If you and I can survive today, I will come back to take your life again." Although Supremacy Xiemye said that he wanted to take Su Zimo's life, he knew that since he was involved in this battle, it would be difficult for him to survive. 5 sacred grounds, 12 holy sons and holy virgins, and the supremes of the myriad races. Even if the supremes of the 4 Daos gathered together, they would not be able to resist. Humph. Holy Maiden by Luo's figure flickered as she faced Supremacy Xiemye and sneered, "You came at the right time." Boom. Holy Maiden by Luo and Supremacy Xiemye clashed head-on. Great Daos intertwined, and heaven and earth shook. Cracks appeared in the surrounding void, but they were quickly mended. Whether it was the dozen or so Supremes of the Primal Chaos Sacred Ground or Supremacy Xiemye, they did not affect the Supremes of the myriad races. Their appearance was like a pebble falling into the vast ocean, barely stirring up any waves. Su Zimo was still under great pressure. At this moment, a ghostly figure shuttled through the Supremes of the myriad races silently. Almost no one noticed. In the blink of an eye, this figure arrived beside the Holy Sons and Holy Virgins. Whoa, whoa. Seeing this figure, the bloody light in the monkey's eyes lit up again. His dispirited expression was swept away, and he beat his chest and stomped his feet in excitement. Su Zimo also saw this person and became spirited. Among the 12 Holy Sons and Holy Virgins, 4 acted to stop Supremacy Evergreen and Supremacy Xiemye. There were 8 more on the battlefield to stabilize the situation. Suddenly, the Skyfall Holy Sun and the others felt their hearts palpitate. The 8 Holy Sons and Holy Virgins hurriedly turned around and saw a black-robed youth appear behind them, expressionless as he looked at the battlefield below. "You're only at the great mastery of the Dao control realm. Why are you here?" The Void Sacred Land's 9 Shadows Holy Sun asked with a frown. The other Holy Sons and Holy Virgins sighed in relief when they sensed the presence of the sacred race bloodline. They only realized this person had silently appeared beside them. Fortunately, this person was a member of the Void Sacred Land. "I'm here to kill," the black-robed youth said simply. "Heh, it's good to use these ants as practice. Nine Shadows' holy son chuckled. Before he could finish speaking, bloody light flashed. Splurt! The green Yong holy sun and Wichilin holy sun trembled as a pair of sharp claws pierced through their heads. Their expressions were blank, their eyes glazed over. The two holy suns' nascent spirits were instantly extinguished. Even in death, they did not understand what had happened. You, the Skyfall holy sun, only had time to utter a single word before a sharp, pitch-black tail pierced through his head and pierced his nascent spirit. He died on the spot. Three holy suns were dead in the blink of an eye. This had happened too quickly. Even when the three holy suns' blood dyed the air and their Tao dissipated, the sovereigns of the myriad races still did not react. The newcomer was standing too close to the holy suns. Moreover, the holy suns were not on guard against him at all. All of their attention was on Su Zimo. Even though there was a difference of a minor level between them, the three holy suns were instantly killed. This holy sun from the void's sacred land was none other than Night Spirit. Those who were called holy sons and holy daughters were all supreme sovereigns who had reigned supreme throughout the ages. Even if a great battle broke out between them and they attacked with all their might, it would be as difficult as ascending to the heavens to kill the other party. Sovereign Evergreen, Sovereign Siemia, and the others had yet to emerge victorious against the four holy sons and holy daughters. But now, three holy sons had perished on the spot. The remaining five holy sons and holy daughters, including the Nine Shadows' holy son, all paled. They immediately distanced themselves from Night Spirit, their faces filled with shock and anger. Chapter 33-37. The Nine Heavens Supremes were astounded when they saw this. Their attacks came to a halt. The loss of three holy princes was too great a blow to the sovereigns. In the hearts of the sovereigns, the holy princes and princesses were invincible existences of the same level. Now, they were dead. Night Spirit, how dare you? The Nine Shadows' Saint Sun was enraged. Night Spirit had suddenly attacked and killed the holy princes of the Yin Yang Sacred Land, Spacetime Sacred Land, and Tian Fa Sacred Land. This was a declaration of war against the three sacred lands. Moreover, Night Spirit was a member of the Void Sacred Land. If there was no explanation for this, conflict would break out between the Void Sacred Land and the other sacred lands. Nine Shadows, what is the Void Sacred Land doing? As expected, the remaining saints and saintesses also asked harshly. The way they looked at Nine Shadows' Saint and Night Spirit had changed. Their eyes were filled with cold killing intent. Night Spirit had not only killed the three holy princes, but more importantly, made the remaining holy princes and princesses wary of each other. It would be difficult for them to work together again. Without the three holy sons, the blood-red color of the Saint Blood Soul banner dimmed a little. This saint artifact, it began to tremble slightly. Not good. The two swords were about to break free. The nine holy princes and princesses paled. Normally speaking, weapons devoured by the Saint Blood Soul banner would quickly be destroyed and turned into a pool of blood. Even if they were devoured, they would be soaked in blood. Their power would be greatly reduced. However, after the Avicii and Netherworld swords were devoured by the Saint Blood Soul banner, not only were they not destroyed, they still wanted to break free from the sea of blood. Break free. The nine holy princes and princesses were hostile towards each other. With the loss of three holy princes, they could no longer suppress the Avicii and Netherworld swords in the Saint Blood Soul banner. Hum. A sword hum sounded. In the next moment, two beams of sword light shot out from the Saint Blood Soul banner. They soared into the sky. Even the river of blood created by the sacred blood could not suppress the Avicii and Netherworld sword's sharpness and killing intent. Rip. Then, a piercing sound rang out. Under countless gazes, the Avicii and Netherworld swords tore the Saint Blood Soul banner to shreds, completely breaking free and reappearing in the world. The Saint Blood Soul banner was left with a dim wooden pole. It fell from the sky, almost destroyed. Hiss. The expressions of all the saints and saintesses changed drastically, and they all gasped. The other sovereigns might not have thought, what did this scene mean? But they knew in their hearts. The sacred blood soul banner was a sacred artifact. Even if they could not unleash the true power of the saint blood, they could not be destroyed so easily. These two swords were probably even more terrifying than they had imagined. Two swords that could destroy a saint artifact. Swoosh, swoosh. After the Avicii and Netherworld swords were freed, Suzimo's eyes burned with a fiery light. With a thought, the two swords instantly tore through the crowd. Blood filled the air. Holy heavens and earths. It was too dense. The Avicii and Netherworld swords passed through. Wherever the sharpness reached, the killing intent was like a sword. No one could stop him. In the blink of an eye, countless Supreme Being experts had fallen. Whether it was the Avicii sword or the Netherworld sword, they would die if they touched it, even if it was just a small wound. All the sovereigns present. There was no chance of survival. Behind the Avicii and Netherworld swords, the figures of the 9 Heavens Supremes fell from the sky one after another. When they fell to the ground, they had already turned into cold corpses. This scene was extremely shocking. The figures of the fallen sovereigns. They were as dense as rain, and their lives were as fragile as grass. The Avicii and Netherworld swords were like two sharp sickles. As the blades swept past, the withered grass was cut. They fell to the ground. The attacks of the sovereigns were also under the terrifying attacks of the Avicii and Netherworld swords. They collapsed. This was the threat of death. No matter how many sovereigns there were, they could not withstand the attacks of the Avicii and Netherworld swords. The sovereigns began to flee in all directions. They avoided the attacks of the Avicii and Netherworld swords. Suzimo, Monkey, Daiyu, and the other sovereigns. They finally had a chance to catch their breaths. Suzimo's figure swayed slightly, his face pale. He had barely any stamina left after resisting the attacks of the sovereigns. The purple flames in Suzimo's eyes were still burning fiercely. His gaze turned and landed on the figures on the battlefield. At this moment, the 9 Shadows' Holy Son had taken the initiative to attack in order to prove the Void's sacred land's innocence. He transformed into the true form of the 9 infants and launched a fierce attack on the Night Spirit. There was a difference of a minor realm between the two sides. The Night Spirit did not meet him head-on. Instead, he relied on his agility to contend with him. The other princes and princesses were about to step forward and attack. Warning bells rang in their hearts as a chill ran down their spines. They saw Suzimo with black hair and green robes. His eyes burned with purple flames, and he held 2 swords in his hands. He stepped through the air. The Chaos Demon Ape was also carrying a shining golden staff. Its entire body exuded a violent aura, and its battle intent swept over like raging waves. Night Spirit, you're crazy. How dare you betray the Void's sacred land? Why are you doing this? The 9 Shadows' Holy Son's 9 heads shrieked as he chased after the Night Spirit. Ha 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 ha. The monkey laughed. Don't panic, Night Spirit. We're here to help you. The 3 of us brothers don't need to fear the princes or the myriad races. You're their brother? The 9 Shadows' Holy Son was both shocked and furious. The eyes on his 9 heads glared viciously at the Night Spirit, as if they wanted an answer. Night Spirit was expressionless. I didn't attack you just now out of respect for the sacred race. If you continue to harass me, don't blame me for killing you as well. How dare you? You think you can? You're asking for death. You betrayed the Void's sacred land. You must die today. The 9 Shadows' Holy Son's 9 heads roared in unison. Since the Night Spirit had chosen to kill the princes, he had no intention of living. The Night Spirit's bloodline had reached atavism, and he was revered as a sacred race. However, he didn't have deep feelings for the Void's sacred land or the sacred race. In his heart, there was only one clan. The 7 sworn brothers Heed, made on Tianhuang continent. Anyone who harmed his clansmen was his mortal enemy. Kill them. Suzimo just fought the myriad races alone. He's already at the end of his rope. We only need to be careful of those 2 swords. That monkey is also heavily injured. There's nothing to fear. Apart from the 4 princes and princesses, there were also the 4 sovereigns, Evergreen, Huarua, Huayan, and Xiemye. Only 5 princes and princesses remained. The nine shadows' holy sun and the night spirit were locked in a fierce battle. It was hard to tell who would emerge victorious. The remaining four princes and princesses immediately saw through Suzimo and the monkey's true strength. They didn't retreat, instead charging forward. The princes and princesses were right. Suzimo was indeed at the end of his rope. Even with the Avicii and Netherworld swords, his strength wasn't enough to contend with the princes and princesses. His bloodline phenomenon and combat art of 3 heads and 6 arms couldn't hold on any longer. However, the princes and princesses didn't realize what the 2 balls of purple fire burning in Suzimo's eyes meant. End of chapter. Chapter 33-38. The 4 saints and saintesses controlled their great Daos and conjured many Dao soldiers to attack Suzimo and Monkey. Suzimo held the Avicii and Netherworld swords in his hands. His eyes burned with purple flames, and he had already seen the great Daos controlled by the 4 saints and saintesses clearly. All the weaknesses and flaws of the 4 great Daos could not be hidden from Suzimo's eyes. Clang, clang, clang. Suzimo waved the Avicii and Netherworld swords. He did not need to expend too much energy to cut down the Dao soldiers of the 4 saints and saintesses. Every time the sword landed, it would strike the weakest spot of the Dao soldiers. Coupled with the sharpness of the Avicii and Netherworld swords, the attacks of the 4 saints and saintesses were like paper in front of Suzimo. They collapsed with a single strike. What? The 4 saints and saintesses were shocked. In the blink of an eye, the 2 sides were already very close. In a panic, the 4 saints and saintesses hurriedly retreated, wanting to distance themselves from Suzimo. Right then, 2 divine lights, one black and one white, shot out from Suzimo's eyes. They intertwined in midair and instantly formed a gigantic yin-yang Pisces diagram. The Pisces chased each other and spun slowly, releasing a huge suction force. It blocked the retreat of the 4 saints and saintesses. Break! The blood chi of the 4 saints and saintesses surged. They conjured a bloodline phenomenon and pushed the power of their sacred blood to the limit. With a combined attack, they shattered the yin-yang Pisces diagram. However, with this delay, Suzimo, who was wielding 2 swords, had already caught up to the 4 of them. Buzz! The sound of a sword rang. The Avicii sword slashed down. The extreme sharpness directly cut off the arm of a saint. In that instant, blood gushed out like a fountain. The saint only had time to let out a scream before his essence spirit was swallowed by the Avicii hell in the sword body. He was buried in it. The Netherworld sword cut open the clothes of a saintess. It left a faint trace of blood on her snow-white back. A terrifying killing intent instantly surged into her body and rushed into her consciousness, killing the essence spirit of this saintess. A saint and saintess, dead on the spot. One of the saints was intercepted by the monkey. Both sides only exchanged a single blow, and the monkey, who was heavily injured, could not withstand the attack and was forced to retreat. However, this saint had also lost his last chance to escape. Suzimo, who was chased over, beheaded by the sword. The 4 holy sons and holy daughters had been defeated too quickly. It was almost a face-to-face encounter. 3 of them had died. At this point in the battle, there were 12 holy sons and holy daughters. Half of it was already broken. When the 9 shadows holy son and the others who were fighting night spirit, eternal green supremacy, and evil extermination supremacy saw this scene, their faces paled in shock and fear. If they allowed Suzimo to continue his killing spree, the 6 of them would not be spared either. Araki Takashi, you overthrew the heavenly court. Release the evil spirit. He even dared to ascend to the great wide world, killing the people of the Holy Land. This is truly unforgivable. Suddenly, a dignified voice echoed through the forbidden zone of space-time. It echoed endlessly. In the next moment, 9 figures appeared in the forbidden zone of time and space at the same time. Their bodies flickered with dazzling light. The holy aura covered the surroundings. It intimidated all races. The saints had descended. The flames of war in the forbidden zone of space-time. They were instantly extinguished. No one could ignore such a level of existence. Suzimo also looked up. These 9 saints. They were the 9 masters of the heavenly courts who had once joined forces to establish the 9 heavens in the medium-class world. He had always wanted to hide Araki Takashi's identity. Actually, what he was most worried about, it was this matter. The 9 masters of the heavenly courts were all saints. In the medium-class world, they were restricted by the laws of heaven and earth and were unable to unleash their combat strength. They were suppressed by him one after another. They returned in a crushing defeat and lost all face. Saints could not be humiliated. These 9 saints from the 5 Holy Lands. If they knew his identity, they would definitely not let this matter rest. You guys leave. Suzimo transmitted his voice to Night Spirit and Monkey beside him. Big brother, since we're here today, we don't plan to live. Even when facing a saint, Monkey was still arrogant and unruly. He raised his head and looked at the saint without the slightest respect. Night Spirit didn't say anything and only nodded. I'm different from you guys. Suzimo continued to transmit his voice. Even if this Qinglian's true body dies, I won't die. My Wu Dao's true body is still here. Hearing this, Monkey and Night Spirit hesitated. Suzimo continued. If you guys escape, we will still have a chance to reunite in the future. If you guys accompany me, you will have died for nothing. The first target of the 9 saints was him. As long as the others didn't take the initiative to offend the 9 saints, the other party wouldn't have a good reason to attack. Near Xianku Mountain, they had just seen Suzimo's counterattack, killing the saints and defeating the supreme beings of all races. The humans all cheered in unison. Their spirits were lifted. But in the blink of an eye, the 9 saints appeared. The surrounding cheers quickly faded. The surroundings became quiet again. The saints had appeared. This meant that this matter had risen to another level. We humans also have saints. We can't let them kill Araki Takashi. However, we humans only have 2 saints. If we fight, I'm afraid, are we just going to watch as Araki Takashi is suppressed by the saints? Discussions broke out in the crowd. Many cultivators subconsciously looked at Saint Jiangqiao and Saint Hui Ming. In the battle between the supreme beings earlier on, the 2 saints were worried that they would break the rules and did not attack. But now, the 5 sacred grounds were the first to break the rules. The 9 saints had descended and were going to attack Suzimo. Saint Rivertide and Saint Hui Ming's expressions changed. They did not say anything, but their hearts were suffering immensely. Heis, the mountain elder, who had been silent, suddenly let out a deep sigh. His body moved and he headed toward the space node in midair. He was about to enter the forbidden space-time ground. When they saw that, Saint Rivertide and Saint Hui Ming made up their minds and followed behind the mountain elder without hesitation, entering the forbidden space-time ground together. Fellow Taoists. The mountain elder arrived at the forbidden space-time ground and looked at the 9 saints. He cupped his fists and said bitterly, today's matter is ultimately a battle between supreme beings. Although there are killings, it's not appropriate for a saint to step in. Saint Remote Heaven sneered and said, of course, we won't interfere in a battle between supreme beings. We're here to punish Araki Takashi for his crimes. If it weren't for him, the evil demon and nether ghost paths wouldn't have revived in the 33 heavens in the northwest. Saint Ether asked expressionlessly, Mountain Elder, are you humans trying to help the evil demon and nether ghost path to bring chaos to the greater world? Everyone, why are you so murderous? The Mountain Elder's expression became even more bitter. He shook his head and said, you don't have to accuse me of such a huge crime. I can't bear it. Fellow Taoists, can you give this old man some face and let them live on account of our past friendship? Whether it was the thousands of races in the forbidden space-time ground or the humans in Shinmi Mountain, they were all shocked. The Mountain Elder was friends with the 9 saints of the 5 sacred grounds. That was why he could address the 9 saints as fellow Taoists despite being a supreme. End of chapter. Chapter 33-39. The 9 saints hovered in the air. They didn't immediately object to the Mountain Elder's request. Instead, they remained silent. Rivertide Saint and Huiming Saint cupped their fists as well. Fellow Taoists, we didn't want things to turn out this way. The human race is willing to withdraw from the forbidden zone of time and space. We hope that fellow Taoists will grant us our wish. Humph. White Sky Saint sneered when he saw Rivertide Saint and Huiming Saint step forward. You've just become saints. Who do you think you are? How do you talk to us? Rivertide Saint and Huiming Saint blanched. As human saints, they were being scolded so mercilessly by the 9 heaven saints in front of all races. Vermilion Saint said coldly, "It's still unknown whether you'll be able to keep your positions. You have no right to negotiate with us." This was a blatant threat. Rivertide Saint and Huiming Saint's expressions darkened. Su Zimo's expression shifted thoughtfully. The saints of the 9 sacred lands didn't take Rivertide Saint and Huiming Saint seriously at all. On the contrary, they didn't offend the Mountain Elder, who was only a sovereign. They seemed to have reined themselves in. With the arrival of the saints, their fates were no longer in their control. Even Su Zimo had no other choice but to observe the situation. Great Sky Saint suddenly spoke up. "Mountain Elder, since you're willing to speak, we can take a step back. You can take these humans back with you. But Araki Takashi and Siemia must die today," White Sky Saint said coldly. "The traitor knight spirit must stay as well. I'll take him back to the Void Sacred Land and punish him according to our rules." When the experts of the myriad races heard this, they were all secretly shocked. The saints of the 9 heavens had given the Mountain Elder plenty of face by making this compromise. It should be known that the human race supremes had also killed many people from the sacred ground in the great battle that had just broken out. Now, a single word from the Mountain Elder would allow him to leave with the remaining human sovereigns. Rivertide Saint and Huiming Saint were delighted as well. In all fairness, being able to obtain this promise from the 9 heaven saints had already far exceeded their expectations. However, that Araki Takashi, no matter what, Su Zimo had gotten involved in this war for the sake of the human race's supreme. If they were to abandon Araki Takashi like this, they would feel very guilty. The Mountain Elder was silent for a moment. He still had a bitter look on his face as he cupped his fists and said, "Everyone here is a sage. Why do you need to lower yourself to the level of these few supreme beings? I've said it before. Araki Takashi has defied the heavens. He must die today. No one can save him." Great Sky Saint directly interrupted Mountain Elder, and his tone was unquestionable. The Mountain Elder smiled bitterly and said, "Back then, he had no choice but to ascend to the Great Thousand World." The Flaming Sky Sage was a little impatient when he heard that. "Old thing, don't push your luck. I'm giving you face, but you don't want it." The Mountain Elder's face turned bitter as he sighed deeply. So impressive? Right at this moment, a cold voice resounded. In the next moment, a woman in a snow-white robe descended upon the forbidden area of time and space. She exuded a powerful sage aura, which was even slightly stronger than the 9 heaven sages. Yao Xue, Su Zimo's heart skipped a beat when he saw who it was. The supreme beings of the 10,000 races in the forbidden area of time and space exclaimed when they saw Saint Guyao's true appearance. Normally, they would not have the chance to see such a powerhouse. Moreover, this was Saint Guyao, who had many legends. In the great wide world, when Saint Guyao was born, she was known as a goddess. Anyone who had met her once would never forget her. Some people even said that her beauty was unparalleled. Taoist Guyao. The 9 heaven sages heard Saint Guyao's unfriendly tone and did not know why she had come. They hurriedly cupped their fists and greeted her. Zhu Tian Sage and Flaming Sky Sage showed a trace of respect towards Saint Guyao and bowed slightly. Even though they were all sages, there would be some differences in strength and status. Zhu Tian Sage and Flaming Sky Sage both came from the ancestral fire sacred ground. Saint Guyao was the daughter of the ancestral fire sacred leader. "Who did you call an old thing just now?" Saint Guyao's gaze turned to Flaming Sky Sage and asked. It's him." Flaming Sky Sage felt guilty and stammered. Slap. Guyao Sage suddenly raised her hand and slapped Flaming Sky Sage right in the face, causing him to stagger back. The 10,000 races were in an uproar. Flaming Sky Sage did not even react. He was stunned and stood rooted to the ground. "You." Flaming Sky Sage came back to his senses and widened his eyes in shock and anger. Although he was not injured, giving him such a slap in front of the 10,000 races was worse than killing him. If it were not for St. Guyao's identity, Flaming Sky Sage would have attacked long ago. Who do you think you are? How dare you speak rudely to him? St. Guyao looked at Flaming Sky Sage expressionlessly and said coldly. Flaming Sky Sage's face turned green and red. He looked at St. Guyao for a long time and finally lowered his head. He gritted his teeth and said slowly, I was rude. This scene made the 10,000 races powerhouses speechless. They were both sages, yet they were able to endure such humiliation in front of everyone. St. Guyao's strength also shocked the 10,000 races powerhouses. When the other 9 heaven sages saw this, they remained silent and did not help Flaming Sky Sage. Others did not know, but they knew in their hearts that Flaming Sky Sage did not dare to resist not only because of St. Guyao's identity and strength, but also because of the suppression of his bloodline. In the ancestral fire sacred ground, there were 3 major races apart from the sacred race: the vermilion bird, the flame race, and the phoenix race. St. Guyao was the first flame race to be born in this world. Flaming Sky Sage also had the flame race's bloodline. In front of St. Guyao, there was a natural bloodline suppression. St. Guyao turned around and looked at Mountain Elder not far away. Her cold eyes gradually became much gentler. Uncle Gu. St. Guyao bowed to Mountain Elder. The way St. Guyao looked at the Mountain Elder was filled with respect, intimacy, and even pity. It was a complicated and inexplicable feeling. Even in his previous life, Su Zimo had never seen Guyao show such an expression to anyone. Uncle Gu? What was the relationship between St. Guyao and Mountain Elder? Mountain Elder's seniority was so high? Su Zimo frowned secretly. This saint seems to be your soulmate in Tianhuang mainland? Suddenly, Daiyu asked with a voice transmission. Su Zimo chuckled bitterly. Ji Yaoxue in my previous life was merely a dream of this St. Guyao. She has long forgotten about it. Su Zimo gave a simple explanation to Daiyu. In reality, St. Guyao had indeed not taken a single glance at Su Zimo ever since she appeared. Mountain Elder looked at St. Guyao, and his vision gradually blurred. In a daze, he seemed to see the appearance of another person. Ah Xian! A deep longing surged in his heart, and he could not help but murmur softly. Thereafter, he snapped out of his daze and looked at St. Guyao, shaking his head gently. Although he felt bitter, he forced a smile and said, Guyao, you're here. End of chapter. Chapter 3340. Uncle Gu. Saint Aunt Yao looked at the white-haired old man with a bitter face. She wanted to say something, but stopped herself. That gentle, refined, and spirited expert from back then had now become like this. She knew that the pain the old man had suffered all these years was 100 times, no, 1,000 times worse than hers. Just as her emotions fluctuated, her great Tao began to show signs of backlash. Her body shook slightly. Saint Aunt Yao closed her eyes and took a deep breath. When she opened her eyes again, her expression was normal. Her eyes were like an ancient well without any ripples. Mountain Elder smiled and said, Go back, Aunt Yao. It's okay to be called an old thing. I don't care at my age. But I care. Saint Aunt Yao said, When we were young, other than Mother, you were the only one who always accompanied me and Yen Ji. You were the best to us. No matter how much trouble we caused, you were never angry. You always looked at us and smiled. When Mother punished us, we ran to your place to hide. You have always protected us and never let us suffer the slightest grievance. Saint Aunt Yao was expressionless. Her tone was calm as if she was talking about something that had nothing to do with her. However, everyone could hear the emotions in her words. Mountain Elder seemed to have thought of something. He was moved. His eyes reddened as he murmured, It's all in the past. Uncle Gu, you're my most respected relative. Saint Aunt Yao said slowly, As long as I'm alive, I won't allow anyone to be disrespectful to you. The last sentence clearly had a hidden meaning. The 9 heaven saints frowned upon hearing this. Great Sky Saint coughed and said, Taoist Aunt Yao, we also respect Mountain Elder very much. We just agreed to let him leave with the humans. We didn't make things difficult for him. That's right, Firmament Saint said in a deep voice. This Araki Takashi isn't human. He once worked with the masters of the four paths in the middle world to break the heavenly court's blockade of the five sacred grounds. The resurgence of the evil demons and dark ghosts in the Great Thousand World is all because of this person. We only want to kill this person. His words sounded reasonable and reasonable. Saint Guyao wanted to stand up for the Mountain Elder, but the Nine Heavens Saints had already compromised and did not stop the Mountain Elder and the other Supremes from leaving. That won't do either. Saint Guyao said calmly. Why is that? Heavenly Saint Jun Tian frowned and questioned. Araki Takashi is obviously on the same side as the Masters of the Four Paths. He has also inherited the Chaos Sacred Grounds inheritance. If we let him go, he will become a huge threat in the future. Saint Guyao said, if Mountain Elder wants to take him away, no one can stop him. This reason seemed to be correct, but there seemed to be something wrong. Dayu glanced sideways at Su Zimo with a deep gaze. This Saint Guyao indeed wanted to help the Mountain Elder, but it seemed that the boundary of her help was a little too big. The Firmament Sage was so angry that he laughed and said loudly, Taoist Guyao, what are you talking about? This Araki Takashi has broken the Heaven Court and is entangled with the Four Das. His crimes are unforgivable. Even if the Ancestral Flame Saint Lord is here, he won't stop us. Saint Guyao glared at him and said coldly, are you trying to use him to pressure me? As soon as she finished speaking, Saint Guyao suddenly attacked. Her saint aura was boundless, and the great Tao manifested, suppressing the Firmament Sage. The Firmament Sage was shocked. He didn't expect that a single sentence from him would cause Saint Guyao to attack him. The Firmament Sage had mentioned the Ancestral Flame Saint Lord because he wanted to use the Ancestral Flame Saint's name to pressure Saint Guyao. After all, the Ancestral Flame Saint Lord was Saint Guyao's father. However, there was already a rift between the father and daughter, and they had been at odds for many years. When the Firmament Sage mentioned the Ancestral Flame Saint Lord, it immediately reminded Saint Guyao of the past, and it made her angry and murderous. Boom! The two saint auras collided, and a loud explosion erupted. Even the forbidden land of time and space started to tremble slightly. The Firmament Sage was no match for Saint Guyao. He took a few steps back, and the blood in his body started to boil. His expression changed slightly. Saint Guyao's combat strength was much stronger than he had imagined. Saint Juentian's divine consciousness moved, and he was ready to unleash his saint aura to kill Araki Takashi. However, Saint Guyao sensed it, and she attacked again. She fought against the two saints, Juntian and Firmament. Boom, boom, boom. The two sides continued to exchange blows, and their saint auras clashed. Saint Guyao had the upper hand, even though she was fighting against two saints. We will stop her. You guys kill Araki Takashi first. Saint Juntian said in a deep voice. Who dares? Saint Guyao shouted. Her chi blood surged, and she was bathed in flames. She waved her hands, and saint auras gushed out, enveloping all the saints of the nine heavens. Saint Guyao was so powerful that she wanted to fight against 9 saints of the 9 heavens. Rumble. The battle between the 10 saints shook the heavens and earth, and the clouds changed color. Under the saint aura, the paragons of all races trembled. Once paragons were involved in a battle of this level, they would be instantly turned into dust. The great Tao that they controlled was like child's play in front of the saints. Let's go. The Mountain Elder reacted immediately when he saw this. He led Suzimo, Night Spirit, and the others toward the nearest spatial node. The saints of the 9 heavens were anxious when they saw this, and their attacks became even more ferocious. However, even with the 9 of them working together, they were still unable to break through Saint Guyao's blockade in a short time. On one hand, Saint Guyao's combat strength was indeed powerful, and she was more powerful than the saints of the 9 heavens. On the other hand, Saint Guyao was the daughter of the Ancestral Flame's sacred leader, and the saints of the 9 heavens were wary of her. Flaming Sky Sage was even more helpless in front of her. Nonsense! At this moment, a majestic voice reverberated throughout the forbidden land of time and space. It was deafening. not to mention the saints of the forbidden land of time and space. Even the beings of the great thousand world who were watching the battle could not help but tremble when they heard this voice through the spatial node. In the next moment, a suffocating pressure appeared in the forbidden land of time and space. All the beings in this world, including the saints of the nine heavens who were fighting, were suppressed to the point that they could not move. The saints of the nine heavens were shocked. A great sage. Only great sages could have this kind of might and power. This pressure did not seem to restrict St. Guyao's movements. St. Guyao was expressionless as she looked at the nine motionless saints not far away. She attacked again without any intention of holding back. "That's enough." Accompanied by a soft shout, a red-haired man with flames burning all over his body suddenly appeared in front of St. Guyao. He had a majestic expression as he gently raised his hand and pressed St. Guyao down. "How long are you going to cause trouble?" The red-haired man looked at St. Guyao and asked slowly. "You have no right to control me." St. Guyao's tone was cold. "I'm your father." The red-haired man's eyes suddenly lit up with two balls of flames as he shouted. All the beings of the 10,000 races were shocked. The sacred lord of ancestral flame had appeared. So what? St. Guyao's expression was still cold as she looked at the sacred lord of ancestral flame without any emotion. She said indifferently, "You have no right to control me from the moment you forced my mother to her death." End of chapter. Chapter 33:41. Everyone was in an uproar. In the forbidden land of time and space, apart from a few people who had experienced that great upheaval and the various sages, no one else knew about this secret past. Now that St. Guyao had said it in public, one could imagine the shock it caused. The supremes of the 10,000 races looked at the ancestral flame sacred leader differently. "What nonsense are you talking about?" The ancestral flame sacred leader was furious. His face was red, and he clenched his fists tightly. Heaven and earth trembled slightly under his loud shout. This matter had always been a taboo in the great thousand world, and no one dared to mention it. Now that St. Guyao had suddenly mentioned it in front of the 10,000 races, one could imagine the anger in the ancestral flame sacred leader's heart. It was to the extent that he lost his composure in front of the 10,000 races. This was a huge blow to his dignity and the ancestral flame sacred ground's face. No matter what secrets there were back then, it was not a glorious thing to force one's Tao partner to death. Such a thing actually happened. Sigh. Her mother was forced to death by her father. St. Guyao is also a pitiful person. After all, she was his Tao partner. How could he do such a thing? Some of the supremes in the forbidden land of time and space secretly communicated with their divine consciousnesses. However, these divine consciousnesses could not be hidden from the ancestral flame sacred leader's senses at all. "How dare you criticize a sage? This is unforgivable," the ancestral flame sacred leader shouted, and his sage aura descended. In an instant, more than 50,000 supremes in the forbidden land of time and space were set ablaze. In the blink of an eye, more than 50,000 supremes had all died. Among them, some were even from the 5 sacred grounds. The crowd fell into chaos and fled in all directions. Hiss! The beings of the myriad races gasped in shock. They did not even dare to criticize, let alone talk about it. The battle between the supremes had been so tragic, and the number of supremes who had died was less than 50,000. Now, more than 50,000 supremes had been turned into ashes in the blink of an eye by the ancestral flame sacred leader. Everyone below the sage level was an ant. Moreover, this was the sacred leader's anger. Seeing the deaths of the sacred grounds people, the 9 heaven sages were silent. With their cultivation realm and status, they naturally did not dare to question the ancestral flame sacred leader. The ancestral flame sacred lord looked around. Wherever his gaze landed, all living beings bowed their heads and kept quiet out of fear. No one dared to look him in the eye. In the end, his gaze landed on St. Guyao. "What? You still want to kill me?" St. Guyao looked at the enraged ancestral flame sacred lord and sneered. "Impudent." The Sacred Lord suddenly raised his hand and slapped St. Guyao's face. Pa! St. Guyao was hit so hard that blood flowed from the corner of her mouth, but she didn't notice it. She looked at the ancestral flame Sacred Lord with a mocking gaze. Vermilion bird. Seeing this scene, the mountain chief frowned and revealed an angry expression. He suddenly shouted, "You feel ashamed. Why are you venting your anger on her?" Many human race supremes looked at the mountain elder in disbelief. In their memories, the mountain elder had a bitter expression most of the time. He rarely smiled, much less got angry. This was the first time they had seen the mountain leader angry. Vermilion bird? Suzimo was a little confused when he heard this name. As if seeing Suzimo's confusion, the monkey said in a low voice, "I heard from my master that the ancestral flame Sacred Lord was the first vermilion bird sacred spirit in the world. So his name is Vermilion Bird. Only he has the right to be called Vermilion Bird. The Yin-Yang Sacred Lord was the first black tortoise sacred spirit in the world. The Nirvana Sacred Lord was the white tiger sacred spirit. The Heavenly Punishment Sacred Lord was the azure dragon sacred spirit." Suzimo nodded inwardly. In that case, the sacred lords of the 4 sacred lands corresponded to the 4 legendary sacred spirits. The monkey continued, "Actually, there is a 5th sacred spirit. He is the time and space sacred lord. His true form is a black Qilin." 5 sacred spirits. Suzimo's heart skipped a beat. Another question came to mind. If the ancestral flame sacred lord was the vermilion bird sacred spirit, how could St. Guyao be from the Yin tribe? The monkey said, "My master once told me that this old man from Xinmi Mountain has an extraordinary background. I didn't expect him to call the ancestral flame Sacred Lord by his name. I don't need you to teach me how to deal with her." The ancestral flame Sacred Lord glared at the mountain elder and huffed, "Guyao, come back with me." Before he'd even finished speaking, the ancestral flame Sacred Lord extended a large hand. An enormous force descended and instantly bound St. Guyao. Although St. Guyao was strong in battle, she was completely powerless in front of a great saint. Seeing that St. Guyao was about to be taken away by the ancestral flame Sacred Lord, the mountain elder couldn't help but step forward. But soon, the light in his eyes dimmed. His clenched fists gradually relaxed, and he returned to his old and bitter self and lowered his head. Even so, the conversation just now had shocked the experts of the myriad races. After all, some of the sovereigns had been killed by the ancestral flame Sacred Lord just because they'd talked in secret. The mountain elder had scolded the ancestral flame Sacred Lord, but he'd still lived. "Uncle Gu." St. Guyao's last words were intermittent. "If Mother was still here, she wouldn't want to see you so depressed." The mountain elder remained silent, allowing the messy white hair in front of his forehead to brush against his forehead. The ancestral flame Sacred Lord appeared for a short while and then disappeared with St. Guyao. The forbidden land of time and space was once again under the control of the saints of the 9 heavens. "Araki Takashi, let's see who can save you today." The hidden heaven saint sneered. He raised his hand slightly, and a large dark hand appeared in the air. Saint power surged and enveloped St. Guyao. Boom! Saints Jiang Chao and Hui Ming, who were originally standing beside him, dashed out and combined their Tao and saint power, destroying the hidden heaven saint's attack. "Araki Takashi, leave now." Saints Jiang Chao and Hui Ming yelled. They had been hesitant, fearful, and hesitant. But at this moment, the 2 human saints still chose to stand up and fight against the saints of the 9 heavens. "You don't know what's good for you," the firmament saint said in a deep voice. "You want to stop us with just the 2 of you?" The saints of the 9 heavens attacked at the same time and engaged in a fierce battle with the saints Jiang Chao and Hui Ming. The battle between the saints started again, and this time, the saints of the 9 heavens had the absolute upper hand. Suzimo, Dayu, and the others didn't manage to escape far. Saints Jiang Chao and Hui Ming were already severely injured by the saints of the 9 heavens. They fell heavily to the ground, their combat power greatly reduced. Die! The saints of the 9 heavens ignored the severely injured saints Jiang Chao and Hui Ming. Instead, they chased after Suzimo and attacked again. Boom! A loud explosion shook heaven and earth. This was the combined attack of the saints of the nine heavens. Even a saint wouldn't be able to withstand it, let alone an honorable. Then, everything disappeared. Suzimo and the others were unharmed. A thin woman in white stood in front of them. She was like a dream, and she withstood the full-powered attack of the saints of the nine heavens. Seeing this woman, the saints of the nine heavens' expression changed. He exclaimed, "Evil Lord." End of chapter. Chapter 33:42. When he saw the evil Lord again, she had already regained her strength and had grown up a lot. She was no longer that weak little girl. Back then, when the Devil Lord was in his twilight years, the evil Lord was thin and weak, and the Ghost Mother was old and frail. But because they had been severely wounded, they had been trapped in a dimensional realm and had never recovered. Facing the evil Lord, the nine heaven sages were slightly panicked. However, he quickly calmed down and his expression returned to normal. They were naturally no match for the evil Lord. But in the space-time sacred land, there would be someone who would go up against the Demon Lord. This fortuitous encounter in the forbidden zone of time and space was originally an overt scheme. If they could lure the supremes of the four races into the forbidden land of time, the five sacred grounds would join forces and annihilate them. If the supremes of the four races did not come, the supremes of the 10,000 races would continue to occupy the Great Path Saint thrones, suppressing the strength of the four races. Of course, the five sacred lands' main target was still the masters of the four Das. If they could lure the four Tao masters out of the 33 heavens, they would have a chance to kill them. Unfortunately, the development of the situation was somewhat beyond the five holy lands' expectations. Because of Suzimo's sudden appearance, the various supremes of the holy clans appeared one after another. The nine heaven saints were also forced to descend. Originally, the nine heaven sages thought that it was impossible for the masters of the four paths to appear, but who would have thought that the evil Lord would suddenly appear? The moment the evil Lord appeared, another figure appeared in the forbidden land of time. This person wore a long black robe, had a head full of black hair, and stood with his hands behind his back. Just looking at him from afar would produce a sense of pressure that was as deep as the abyss and as lofty as the mountain. The two of them looked at each other from a distance. They hadn't even fought yet, but the space-time forbidden land was already starting to tremble. To be able to stand against the evil Lord and not be at a disadvantage. The cultivation level of this person was self-evident. The great sage. The beings of the myriad races were secretly shocked. Although the arrival of the ancestral flame sacred master had brought great pressure to everyone, he didn't really make a move. Instead, he left quickly. Now that these two great sages had appeared in the forbidden land of time, it was obvious that they were going to fight. A battle between great sages. Greetings, space-time holy Lord. When the nine heavens sage saw the black-robed man, he hurriedly bowed. The Lord of the space-time sacred land. The enchantment, one of the legendary five great sacred spirits. The space and time saint faintly smiled. I did not think that the demon lord would be willing to descend in his true form for the sake of a supreme's disciple. After all, in their eyes, even saints were a price they could abandon at any time. Hearing this, Sovereign Siemya curled his lips and stole a glance at Suzimo. He thought to himself, it's hard to say if it's because of me, however. The space-time sacred lord stopped smiling and changed the topic. Since you're here, don't leave. His voice hadn't finished resounding through the air when the two figures suddenly collided. It was as if they'd traversed space and time, and a deafening bang erupted. A battle between great sages had broken out. The power of a great sage could destroy Das. The clash between the two great sages caused cracks to appear in the space-time forbidden zone, as if it could be destroyed at any moment. Fortunately, the Stone of Life emitted waves of light, quickly repairing this space. Every time the space-time Holy Lord attacked, the sky would collapse and the earth would cave in. The space-time Holy Lord's true form was the Ink Chilin. The Black Chilin cultivated one of the most fundamental great Taos, the Great Tao of Earth. The Great Taos that the five great holy masters cultivated corresponded to the metal, wood, water, fire, and earth Taos. For example, the Great Tao of Yellow Sand, the Great Tao of Earth, the Great Tao of Gravity, the Great Tao of Landslide, the Great Tao of Earth. The origin of many Great Taos was the Great Tao of Earth. When the space-time Sacred Lord attacked with his full strength, the Great Tao of Earth filled this space-time forbidden zone. At this moment, all the Great Taos that were related to the Great Tao of Earth were firmly suppressed and fell into chaos, unable to be controlled by themselves. Even Great Sky Sage could not avoid it. This was the Saint Domain unique to great sages. In the Saint Domain, all Great Taos would become disordered, and it would not affect or harm the Saint Domain's master at all. The only place that could resist a Saint Domain was another Saint Domain. Many experts who were affected by the Demon Lord's Saint Domain were confused and lost. They were immersed in a dream, unable to extricate themselves. The closer they were to the battlefield, the greater the impact. The entire space-time forbidden zone had become the battlefield of two Saint Domains. It was very difficult for the 9 Heaven Sages to attack Suzimo and the others. And Suzimo and the others were unable to move an inch under the resistance of the Saint Domain. It was impossible for them to leave. No one would have thought that this space-time forbidden zone would eventually become the battlefield of a great sage. So lively. At this moment, another voice suddenly appeared in the space-time forbidden zone. Even the sound of the battle between the space-time Sacred Lord and the Demon Lord could not drown out this person's voice. The next moment, another Saint Domain forced its way into the space-time forbidden zone and suppressed the Demon Lord. The second great sage had descended. This great sage was tall and his back was abnormally broad. When the Saint Domain descended, all great Taos related to the origin of water were suppressed. The first black tortoise sacred spirit born in the world. He was also the master of the yin-yang sacred ground. With the two sacred lords joining forces, the Demon Lord was instantly at a disadvantage. The Dream Realm Saint Domain shook and was on the verge of collapse. He was forced to retreat, and a trace of blood flowed out from the corner of his mouth. Demon Lord, you must die today. The space-time Sacred Lord roared. Rumble. With a loud explosion, the 3 Saint Domains erupted in an earth-shattering collision, almost tearing the space-time forbidden zone apart. Heaven and earth seemed to have fallen silent. The next moment, a figure fell heavily to the ground, creating a huge crater. The Demon Lord was ultimately no match for the 2 Sacred Lords joining forces. In a sense, the origins of these 2 Sacred Lords were much greater than the Demon Lords. The 2 Sacred Lords were living beings born at the beginning of the 3 realms evolution. Their starting point was the Sacred Spirit. As for the Demon Lord, he relied on his cultivation to survive that great upheaval. He was suppressed in a middle world for several epochs, cultivating step by step until he became a great sage. The Demon Lord, the Brahma Ghost Mother, and the Lord of Hell still had not appeared. Suzimo was not surprised by this. Whether it was the battle of the 33 heavens or the words of the space-time Sacred Lord, they all revealed an important piece of information. The 4 Tao Masters were relatively safe only in the 33 heavens. Once they left, it was very likely that they would encounter danger. The Demon Lord, the Brahma Ghost Mother, and the Lord of Hell naturally would not take the risk. The Demon Lord was extremely egotistical. He did not distinguish between right and wrong. He would only choose the path that was beneficial to him. The Brahma Ghost Mother and the Lord of Hell had a grudge with Suzimo, so they would not appear to save him. The Demon Lord had appeared, but not only did he fail to save Suzimo and the others, but he had also fallen into a helpless situation. The Demon Lord slowly stood up from the crater. Despite being heavily injured, he was still expressionless, as if he could not feel any pain. The 2 Sacred Lords did not intend to give the Demon Lord any chance. They joined forces again, and the 2 Saint Domains descended, suppressing the Demon Lord. The Demon Lord looked to the side and stared at the white-haired old man in the distance. He suddenly said, Are you still not going to attack? Don't forget who you are. This is the human race's life's sacred land, and you were once the master of this sacred land. These were the first words the Demon Lord said after arriving in the space-time forbidden zone. And these words were earth-shattering. End of chapter. Chapter 33:43. The Master of this sacred land, the sacred Lord of life. The hearts of all living beings were greatly shaken. Many experts in the Great Thousand World knew that the Life Sacred Land had been destroyed, just like the Chaos Sacred Land and the Reincarnation Sacred Land. But they didn't expect the sacred Lord of Life to still be alive. Moreover, it was this white-haired, bitter-looking old man from Shinmi Mountain. Apart from the woodcutter and the fisherman, all the human supremes, including Suzimo and Daiyu, were shocked. All signs showed that the mountain elder had a powerful background. Otherwise, the evil lord wouldn't have sent Daiyu to the mountain elder. But Suzimo didn't expect the mountain elder to be the sacred Lord of Life, a supreme saint expert. What happened back then? Why did the sacred Lord of Life survive when the Life Sacred Land was destroyed? What was the mountain elder's current situation? His cultivation seemed to be only at the perfected Tao controlling realm. Did his cultivation level drop, or was he hiding his cultivation level? The sacred Lord of Life from back then is long dead. The space-time sacred Lord smiled faintly and said, "The mountain elder before you is just a walking corpse guarding Shinmi Mountain. He has long lost the sharpness of a sacred lord." The Yin-Yang sacred lord looked at the evil lord with a hint of mockery in his eyes. "Do you really think that by revealing his identity, he can help you?" Although he survived back then, his cultivation level dropped to the Supremes as a punishment. He hasn't moved for many years. What can he do? The mountain elder still lowered his head and didn't say a word. The evil lord didn't answer. He stared at the mountain elder and said coldly, "Back then, Saint Xin Pin sacrificed herself to give you a chance to live. She didn't want you to be so depressed." Saint Xin Pin. When Suzimo heard this title, he seemed to think of something. Shan Zhang's originally calm eyes also finally had a trace of ripple in them. The evil lord continued, "Her bones are buried under Shinmi Mountain. What's the point of accompanying her for so many years? Now that the time has come, if you still don't do anything, Saint Xin Pin will have died in vain." It was only at this moment that Suzimo knew of such a background of Shinmi Mountain. If he was not mistaken, Saint Xin Pin was most likely the ancestral flame sacred lord's cultivation partner, Saint Gu Yao's mother. At the same time, he suddenly had an answer to another question in his heart. Why was the ancestral flame sacred master a vermilion bird sacred spirit while Saint Gu Yao was from the flame clan? The most likely possibility was the union of the ancestral flame sacred master and Saint Xin Pin, or the union of the vermilion bird and the human race, giving birth to the first flame tribe member in the world, Gu Yao. Xin Ku? Hearing Saint Xuanpin's name, the Yin-Yang Saint Master suddenly snorted. He glanced at the mountain elder and said, "Both of you were born at the same time and grew up together. She even exchanged her life for yours. Who knows if there's anything going on between the two of you? I've already told Vermilion Bird that this woman is not worthy of his pity." Hearing this, the mountain elder suddenly raised his head. His originally turbid eyes were now filled with anger. He slowly said, "You shouldn't have tainted her innocence." To the mountain leader, no matter what others said, no matter how they mocked him, humiliated him, or provoked him, he didn't care. However, he would never allow anyone to insult Saint Xin Pin. No one could do it. Between the two of them, there was nothing between them. The two of them had grown up together, cultivated together, and experienced countless years together. However, in the end, they were not fated to be together. Sometimes, even the long years of companionship could not overcome the arrangement of the heavens and the dark. Even so, Saint Xin Pin was still the person he loved the most. He even loved the two children that Saint Xin Pin had with the ancestral flame sacred master, Yaoji and Yanji. He treated the two children as his own and loved them 100 times more. "You care so much about her?" The Yin-Yang Saint Master laughed softly and said, "You want to challenge me?" Back then, Saint Xin Pin's death had saved Life Sacred Master's life. As a price, Saint Xin Pin was severely injured by the combined forces of the 5 Sacred Masters. This caused her cultivation level to drop, and she became a mountain leader guarding Xin Pin Mountain. All these years, The mountain leader had never had any conflicts with the five sacred masters. Even when a human saint was killed by the Tian Fa sacred ground, the mountain leader did not appear. Even if the Yin-Yang saint master had wanted to kill him, it had gradually faded. After all, in their eyes, Saint Xianpin was already dead. This senseless and muddle-headed old man was no threat to them. But now, the Yin-Yang saint master wanted to kill him again. If the mountain leader really wanted to fight him, he did not mind killing him. If a prime dared to be disrespectful to a sacred master, he would definitely die. The mountain leader did not answer. He suddenly took a step forward. Boom! In the forbidden land of time and space, the heavens and earth trembled, and the great Tao resonated. Endless power surged into the mountain leader's body. His saint power surged violently. The mountain leader's aura was soaring rapidly. He had entered the saint realm with just one step. The paragons of all races were shocked. Ever since the battle in the forbidden land of time and space broke out, the great Tao here had become chaotic and disorderly. The flames of war had spread to every corner of the forbidden land of time and space. There was almost no pure land in this world. Under such circumstances, there was no way to unify the Tao. The great Tao was extremely unstable and violent. Trying to unify the Tao under such circumstances was no different from suicide. Thus, no paragon dared to try unifying the Tao and breaking through to the saint realm. After the battle between the great sages broke out, the forbidden land of time and space was filled with cracks and was on the verge of collapse. It was even more impossible to unify the Tao and become a saint. No one had expected that the mountain leader would try to break through to the saint realm under such circumstances. Moreover, he had become a saint in one step. Compared to the shock of the paragons of all races, the space-time sacred lord and the yin-yang sacred lord were much calmer. They only frowned. Even if the mountain leader had entered the saint realm, he would not be a threat to them. The yin-yang sacred lord even clapped his hands and laughed. He said leisurely, "You have become a saint again. You have some skills." The space-time sacred lord also smiled faintly. After all, he is the first human in this world. In terms of luck, no one can compare to him. The mountain leader remained silent. After standing still for a while, he took another step forward. Boom! Before the great Tao's voice dissipated, it was replaced by another loud voice. It was not just the forbidden land of time and space. Even the entire greater world was filled with strange phenomena. Everyone was shocked. The space-time sacred lord and the yin-yang sacred lord's expressions finally changed. A power that could compete with them surged from the mountain leader's body. His aura was terrifying. This was a great sage. The mountain leader had only taken 2 steps, and his cultivation had recovered. He had become a great sage again. Of course, it was because he had reached such heights before. However, going from a paragon to a great sage in 2 steps was enough to shock the entire greater world. The mountain leader's hair was still white, and he still looked old. However, his eyes were like torches, and his aura was completely different. 33 heavens. In a ball of black fog, countless ferocious and terrifying ghost faces suddenly appeared. Then, a woman's voice came from within. "The life-sacred Lord has returned." Another man, who was emitting a sinister aura, raised his eyebrows slightly and smiled. "It seems that we have another helper." It's hard to say. With his back facing the two, a man in armor sitting on a tombstone said lightly, "He has only become the life-sacred Lord. It doesn't affect the overall situation. The treasure that Master made is with that person, right?" The woman suddenly asked. "Yes." The man on the tombstone replied, "It depends on what he chooses." End of chapter. Chapter 3344. Forbidden Spacetime Zone. The mountain elder had become a supreme sage. Without saying a word, he crossed the void and appeared before the yin-yang sacred master. He raised his saint domain and suppressed the yin-yang sacred master. The yin-yang sacred master's words had truly angered him. Boom! The saint domains of both sides clashed with a loud explosion. On the other side, the evil lord faced the space-time sacred master once again. The battle between the supreme sages had begun again. The four saint domains clashed in the forbidden space-time zone. They devoured each other, causing the great Tao in this area to become chaotic and chaotic. A great Tao storm was formed. The mountain elder had just become a supreme sage. Although he looked old, his battle strength was shocking. The two sides had just clashed, but the mountain elder's saint domain was already suppressing the Yin-Yang sacred master. Although this place was called the forbidden space-time zone, it was still the life sacred land. And the mountain elder was the owner of this place. The stone of life emitted a 5-colored divine light that entered the mountain elder's saint domain, giving it an endless supply of energy. The Yin-Yang sacred master's saint domain started to shrink under the mountain elder's attacks. On the other side, the evil lord had just been injured by the space-time sacred master and the Yin-Yang sacred master. Now that he was facing the space-time sacred master alone, he didn't have any advantage. Of course, after cultivating to the supreme sage level, the difference in battle strength wasn't that big. Even if one side had the upper hand, it was impossible to completely suppress the other side in a short period of time. Boom, boom, boom. The battle between the supreme sages continued. The four saint domains had been pushed to their limits. Each of them released their own light that filled the entire area. Apart from the people in the forbidden space-time zone, the living beings in the Great Thousand World couldn't see what was happening inside through the spatial node. In the forbidden space-time zone, the great Tao storm swept in all directions. The spatial node had already been destroyed. Suzimo, Dayu, Monkey, and the others were forced to stay here and watch this earth-shattering battle. Dayu frowned and murmured, "Luckily, the remaining 3 sacred masters didn't appear. Otherwise, the evil lord and the mountain elder wouldn't be able to hold on." Suzimo pondered deeply. Could the 3 lords of the sacred grounds be wary because they're worried that the fiend lord, ghost mother, and the lord of hell would do something? That might not be the case. The monkey seemed to have thought of something and said, "There is another possibility, which is that the space-time sacred master and the Yin-Yang sacred master have absolute confidence in suppressing the evil lord and the mountain elder. Thus, the remaining 3 sacred masters naturally do not need to act." Suzimo frowned slightly. The monkey's words made him feel a little worried. After Mountain Elder became a supreme sage, the space-time Holy Lord and the Yin-Yang Holy Lord were a little surprised. However, they didn't seem to take it to heart and still acted as if victory was in their hands. At this moment, the time and space Holy Lord showed a trace of impatience and said coldly, "Evil Lord, you were only a saint back then and didn't have the chance to try this sacred artifact. Today, I'll give you a chance." Before he finished speaking, the space-time sacred lord pointed forward. Rumble. The void above the evil lord's head suddenly split open as a mysterious yellow 9-floored pagoda descended from the skies, emitting an endless amount of pressure as it came crashing down heavily. When this pagoda appeared, the heavens and earth let out a sorrowful wail. Not to mention the Supremes present, even the 9 heaven saints revealed a trace of fear in their eyes when they saw the pagoda. This mysterious yellow 9-story pagoda seemed to contain a supreme might of heaven and earth. In fact, this level of majesty had already surpassed that of a great sage. The evil lord's face was grim as his figure suddenly disappeared. The starlight in the sky flowed into a river. On the river, a huge spiritual boat floated quietly, carrying countless dream realms. Rumble. The pagoda descended, and the countless dream realms shattered. After a short confrontation, the spiritual boat suddenly exploded and collapsed. The evil lord's figure reappeared, but he was covered in blood and his face was even paler. "Hee." The space-time sacred lord chuckled and said, "How does this mysterious yellow pagoda taste?" The evil lord didn't reply. His figure was already on the verge of collapse. From the looks of it, it was unknown whether he could survive the next attack. On the other side, the Yin-Yang Holy Lord suddenly threw out a picture scroll. This picture scroll started with the 9 palaces and continued to evolve. It revealed the 8 trigrams, the 7 stars, the 6 lights, the 5 elements, the 4 divisions, and the 3 talents. Finally, it stopped at the yin and yang. This picture scroll seemed to contain all the mysteries of heaven and earth and had evolved into the universe. Rumble. The mountain elder's holy region was also crushed by this picture scroll. Even with the stone of life, it couldn't hold on any longer. Old thing. The Yin-Yang Holy Lord sneered and said, "This Taiji diagram isn't comfortable, right?" The space-time Sacred Lord and the Yin-Yang Holy Lord each took out a sacred artifact and instantly turned the situation around, severely injuring the Mountain Elder and the Evil Lord. The sacred artifacts of the Mountain Elder and the Evil Lord were completely destroyed by the mysterious yellow pagoda and the Taiji diagram. They lost their light. These two sacred artifacts, Su Zimo felt his heart palpitate. Even the Sacred Lord's descent didn't give him such a feeling of fear. Monkey suddenly said, "I heard from Master that the reason why the 5 Sacred Lords are so powerful and undefeatable is because they each have a Heavenly Tao sacred artifact." Heavenly Tao sacred artifact? Su Zimo frowned. Monkey nodded and said, "It is said that the Heavenly Tao sacred artifact contains the power to kill a great sage." Su Zimo and the others were shocked. In a battle between sages, only victory and defeat could be determined. It was difficult to determine life and death. The power of a sage was not enough to destroy a Tao. As long as a Tao was not destroyed, a sage would not die. Only a great sage had the power to destroy a Tao. It was the same between great sages. In a battle between great sages, it was difficult to completely kill each other. However, if what Monkey said was true, then the sacred lords of time and space and yin and yang who had the Heavenly Tao sacred artifacts had the power to kill a great sage. Su Zimo said, "If that's the case, the power of the Heavenly Tao sacred artifact should have already surpassed that of a great sage. How did the 5 sacred lords get their hands on such a weapon?" "I don't know." Monkey shook his head and said, "Master is very secretive about this and doesn't want to talk about it." Monkey paused for a while and said, "Master is unwilling to fight with the 5 sacred lords. He must be afraid of them." "No wonder." Su Zimo said, "The Demon Lord, Ghost Mother, and Lord of Hell have not appeared. They must be afraid of the Heavenly Tao sacred artifacts in the hands of the 5 sacred lords." On second thought, Su Zimo was puzzled. He frowned and asked, "Since the 5 great sacred lords have the Heavenly Tao saint weapon, why did they return empty-handed when they fought against the 4 Tao masters back then?" "I don't know the exact situation," Monkey said. "I only heard from Master that the 5 sacred lords' Heavenly Tao sacred artifacts did not seem to be able to unleash their true power in the 33 heavens." "Yes." Su Zimo nodded. This was also why the Demon Lord and the other 2 were unwilling to leave the 33 heavens easily. The 5 sacred lords were also aware of this. Therefore, they wanted to use this opportunity to lure the masters of the 4 Tao out. Unfortunately, the Demon Lord and the other 2 were unwilling to take the risk. Only the Demon Lord could descend with his true body. End of chapter. Chapter 3345. The arrival of the 2 Heavenly Tao Saint artifacts instantly changed the tide of the battle. For some reason, the 2 Heavenly Tao Saint artifacts made Su Zimo's heart palpitate. At the same time, they made him feel extremely disgusted. This feeling of disgust seemed to originate from Chaos Qinglian's inherited memories. However, after fusing with the creation, karmic fire, and karmic virtue lotus, his inherited memories were not complete. He could not see what had happened back then. However, Chaos Qinglian's destruction must have had something to do with these 2 Heavenly Tao Saint artifacts. Another strange thing happened to him as well. Even when the Space-Time Sacred Lord and the Yin-Yang Sacred Lord arrived, the Zhujiao and Yueying Sacred Stones did not react. However, after the 2 Heavenly Tao Saint artifacts arrived, the Zhujiao and Yueying Sacred Stones seemed to have sensed something. They suddenly hid their auras and did not reveal any energy waves. Even when Su Zimo tried to activate them with his divine will, the 2 sacred stones did not react at all. After ascending to the greater world, the 2 sacred stones clearly showed a different state from the lesser world and middle world. They even awakened their spiritual consciousness and could cultivate on their own. Because of this, Su Zimo deduced that the Zhujiao and Yueying sacred stones should have come from the greater world. Now, under the suppression of the two heavenly Tao Saint artifacts, the two sacred stones went into hibernation. Su Zimo looked at the Mountain Elder and the Evil Lord in midair with a worried expression. The Mountain Elder's sacred domain had been shattered after taking on the Taiji diagram. He was already injured. The Evil Lord was injured by the two sacred lords and was suppressed by the heaven-earth black-yellow pagoda. He was in an even worse state. It was unknown if he could survive the next attack. He did not expect that the so-called opportunity in the forbidden land of time would drag the two great sages into it. They might even be killed. Su Zimo and the others were just small fries. The sacred lords did not even take them seriously. The great sages were the real targets of the 5 sacred grounds. The Yin-Yang sacred lord looked down at the Mountain Elder with the Taiji diagram above his head. He said coldly, "Gu Shun, you should have died more than 6 billion years ago. You should be satisfied that you have lived to this day." The space-time sacred lord held the heaven-earth black-yellow pagoda. He was not in a hurry to attack. He wanted to see if the demon lord and the others would show up. Unfortunately, from beginning to end, the demon master and the other two did not show up. The space-time holy lord looked at the evil lord with eyes full of pity. He said indifferently, "Those 3 are really heartless. They watched you die without doing anything." The evil lord did not reply. He merely looked at the Mountain Elder on the other side and said expressionlessly, "In this life, it's time for you to make a choice. You are the first human to be born in this world. You cultivate the great Tao of man. You are not only the sacred Lord of life, but also the Lord of human Tao." Everyone was in an uproar. Su Zimo and Dai Yu were shocked when they heard this. The two looked at each other and thought of the same thing at the same time. Back then, when Dai Yu was severely injured, the human path that leaped into the 6 abysses of the netherworld appeared in Tianhuang mainland. There were also all sorts of strange things about Tianhuang mainland. Not to mention, there were many races on planet Tianhuang. The many treasures that appeared in Tianhuang mainland alone were enough to shock anyone. Even treasures that originated from the greater thousand worlds such as illumination and netherglow were gathered in Tianhuang mainland. If Tianhuang mainland was formed from the shards of the human Tao that the sacred Lord of life cultivated, everything would make sense. That was because the birth of Tianhuang mainland originated from the greater thousand worlds. Back then, the sacred Lord of life was severely injured, and her human Tao was shattered. A shard fell into a minor world and formed Tianhuang mainland later on. Dai Yu said, "Back then, I mentioned to you that many humans in Tianhuang mainland do not have spirit roots. That's strange. Now that I think about it, it's not hard to understand if Tianhuang mainland was formed from a shard of the human Tao." At that moment, some of the doubts in Su Zimo's heart were answered. It was no wonder why there were only 4 Taos in the middle world and no heavenly Tao or human Tao. That was because the Lord of human Tao was not in the middle world at all. Su Zimo lamented when he looked at the white-haired old man. To think that this old man who guarded Xianmi mountain day and night with a bitter expression was not only the sacred Lord of life, he was also the Lord of human Tao. However, the Lord of human Tao did not seem to have a close relationship with the 4 Taos. "So what if you're the Lord of human Tao?" Sacred Lord Yin-Yang scoffed coldly. "Your lifespan is up. What sacred Lord? Even the title of the human master can't save you." At this moment, the Mountain Elder's hand reached into his wide sleeves and slowly took out a tattered book from within. Su Zimo's heart skipped a beat when he saw the tattered book. He had lived in Xianmi Mountain for a few years, and each time he met the Mountain Elder, the latter would always have a tattered book beside him. At times, he would flip it open and read it. At other times, he would cover his face and take a nap. At other times, he would toss it aside casually. Although the book looked tattered, Su Zimo was not bothered by it. At that moment, the Mountain Elder took out that tattered book. Shifting his gaze, Sacred Lord Yin-Yang looked at the tattered book and suddenly chuckled. "Oh, I was wondering what else you were relying on. So, it's this human book. Not bad." The Mountain Elder nodded. Looking at the tattered book in his hand, a complicated look appeared in his eyes. Sacred Lord Yin-Yang shook his head and sighed. The human book is also a heavenly Tao Saint artifact. It's a pity that it's useless now. Why don't you give it a try? The mountain elder said calmly. Then I'll fulfill your wish. Sacred Lord Yin Yang did not waste any time. He took out the Tai Chi diagram again and pressed it down on the mountain elder. Sacred Lord Yin Yang also threw out the heaven-earth black-yellow pagoda toward the evil lord. The descent of the two heavenly Tao Saint artifacts shook the earth and mountains. The mountain elder suddenly threw the human book in his hand into the air and released his divine sense. Rumble. At the same time, the stone of life in the forbidden land of time seemed to have sensed something. It suddenly rose from the ground and fused with the human book. The human book shone brightly. The tattered pages of the book started to heal rapidly after fusing with the stone of life. The power of the human book continued to rise. The human book in the air flipped through its pages rapidly. Each page emitted a dazzling light and an endless amount of power. Ripples appeared in the air as it tried to resist the power of the two heavenly Tao Saint artifacts. Boom, boom, boom. Following a series of loud bangs, the light emitted by the human book flickered and its aura was completely suppressed. Humph! Sacred Lord Yin Yang snorted. Even a complete human book cannot resist the power of two heavenly Tao Saint artifacts. Do you think your tattered book can resist the power of two heavenly Tao Saint artifacts? The mountain elder knew this very well. However, he had no other choice. The evil lord was in a very bad condition. He could not resist the next attack of the heaven-earth black-yellow pagoda. He could only use the human book to resist the power of the two heavenly Tao Saint artifacts. Su Zimo looked at the human book in the air and frowned slightly. After fusing with the stone of life, the tattered pages of the human book had healed. However, it seemed like it was still a distance away from becoming a real heavenly Tao Saint artifact. Night Spirit suddenly said. A page was torn out from the middle of the human book. Su Zimo was stunned when he heard this. Suddenly, a thought flashed across his mind. End of chapter. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.